Yeah, sure. I guess I should stop over and get one.
It's just nice to be able to read it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Kind
why'd you
of
take
scanned
this?
it and trying to figure out. Thank you.
Yeah, did you really read that?
No, I didn't see any of this. But I did click on it.
There's a lot of.
Yeah, there's. A lot of this is the,
He's got. He's got a copy of the existing.
Yeah.
C1, so he's got some outtakes of the existing comp. You should.
They're not entirely.
Oh,
that's right. There's a coupon. No, I
City's ordinance, just in my perspective.
Right,
So
sure.
you can reference it.
Right.
Because using the online meeting codes is
Yeah.
not always fun if you're old like us.
Speak for yourself. Yeah. No, I clicked on things, so.
This fix all what you talked about last time. So, usually a motion to adjourn now, and then public hearing. In this case, we don't have a public hearing tonight because it's just a sketch, it's just a workshop.
Okay, I'd like to call this, sorry, it's been a while since we've been here. I'd like to call this Planning Commission public meeting to order at 7 p.m. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Okay. The role of the Planning Commission is to hold workshops to review and make recommendations to the City Council on all manner of policy and legislative activities. In some cases, we act as a quasi-judicial board for land use cases, which can then be appealed to either the council, the hearings examiner, or the court. Could we have the roll call now, please?
Certainly. Tel Jensen, not here yet. Sharon Watt,
Present?
Connie Taylor,
Present.
June Jones,
Here.
Frank Occhipinti.
Here.
Okay, at this time, I would ask that any member of the public who wishes to give testimony for items that are not on the agenda, please approach the microphone at this time. Okay. Okay. Hearing none, we will go on to the consent items. So the no, you didn't put that on here.
Yeah, sorry, I just.
Okay,
realized that.
all right, the agenda approval. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, then the consent items, the minutes from the June meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the June meeting?
I move to approve the minutes from the June meeting.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the June meeting. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes? Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we are going to have a discussion, a workshop on code interpretation. Staff report.
Thank you very much. So I have some slides for you. The agenda memo that was prepared it's prepared as a case, but there's no formal application by an applicant. I'm strictly looking for interpretation or your opinion on my interpretation, because this has come up twice and I have two people waiting for specific answers. And specifically what we're talking about is we're talking about residential uses in the downtown core, the central business district, C1. And according to the map, that's generally the Davidson Avenue and in that neighborhood downtown. The section that we're talking about is the central business district C1 zoning, and that is 1732-020. And subsection 10 in the permitted uses talks about dwellings that are located above commercial uses. So if you take a look at the slides that I have on the screen, sorry Frank, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's essentially two buildings. One's right across from City Hall, the other one's just down the street next to Woodland Realty, where there is a commercial space on the bottom and there are apartments upstairs. This is what I interpret section 10 to refer to, and that is residential uses that are separate from and have nothing to do with commercial space down below. Now, this next slide deals with section or subsection 24, which talks about live-work units. There were no perfect examples of Woodland yet that occurred to this, but the live-work unit is actually more of a definition in the building code. It's not necessarily in the zoning code. So it's a listed use, but it doesn't really provide guidance. Now, the reason why this is important is because live-work units are permitted, and when you read the building code, what it says is live-work units can have residential on the ground floor. And if you take a look at these two examples, this is an example that I pulled off the internet of live-work, where the front includes large doors that are, I think the one on the left is an architectural office, and the one on the right, which looks virtually identical, is a chiropractor's office. But don't quote me on that, because I pulled them off the internet really quickly, and there weren't good descriptions of them. But it's an example of kind of how the front is commercial. Now, we have some examples, like immediately adjacent to the City Hall annex is the Lovejoy Gallery and the Lovejoy office, where she has apartments upstairs, and she has an office and an art gallery downstairs. And so it's kind of a live-work unit because she both lives and works on the site. Now, the quirk is when we get to section 52. Section 52 says residential use is allowed on the bottom floor of any building in the C1 zone that does not share a property line with Davidson Avenue or Gorig. So what it implies is you can have no residential uses on the ground floor if you're on Davidson and Gorig. But if you take this example, or actually the Moose Lodge as an example, where they have residential doors, which would be permitted under 24 and section 10, but 52 might preclude this in our current code. Now, let's see. So if you get to the conclusions of my section here, what I have been telling citizens, in this case, we have a person who would like to develop some live-work units on 3rd Street. And they would be 1 story with an office in front and a living unit in the back. And in this case, I told them that was okay for several reasons. One is it's permitted under Section 24, and under Section 52, it doesn't front on Gorig or Davidson, even though under Section 10, only lobbies of residential uses would be allowed on the ground floor. So I have this kind of inconsistency where 10 and 52 seem to allow ground floor, and Section 10 does not allow residences. So my conclusions are in the staff report or the agenda memo, and hopefully you've had a chance, and if you have any questions, I can answer those.
The Moose has a lobby on the main floor, so there's stairs to get to the 2nd floor.
Yes.
Perfect example of a commercial residential
Yes. So it makes it consistent with 10,
with 10.
but inconsistent with 52 because it's on Davidson. So I've just been, to me, the defining line is the street frontage. Where does the entrance come out? And under 10, the lobby in the Moose would be acceptable under Section 10. So unless you have a feeling that I should be discouraging residential uses or shared uses in the C1 district.
Any discussion?
I have one question. So, I know somebody who wants to develop some of those places on 3rd, but do they have to be, if there's a live work, does it have to be occupied? I mean, could you have a tenant, or could you keep your office and then have somebody be living in the back or upstairs? Because I know there was a design presented some time ago where it had workspace in the bottom, then it had living space up top with decks and balconies.
So to be a permitted use under Section 24 as a live work, they have to both have their business and their residence in the single unit.
Right, so they cannot.
If they were
have-
completely separate, I would treat them like 10, where you have those residences that stand alone have to be on the 2nd floor.
Right.
We do not want residences by themselves on the 1st floor.
Okay, I just wanted some clarification on that
Okay.
because.
I would like residences on the 1st floor. I think if the homeless people can sleep on the sidewalk, they ought to be able to sleep behind a door, even on Garrick and Davidson. So just to add to the conversation, I think that's a regressive requirement. So, but I'll move to agree with the planning commissioner's findings. And if you're done with your report,
And you don't actually have to make a motion, other than if you want to direct me to bring this back to you as a public hearing. This is a work session, so you don't have to make a recommendation to the city council. You don't have to recommend code language. You just need to let me know whether I need to bring something to you to vote on, and if so, what language would you like to see?
Or if we're just happy to let you interpret it the way you've been interpreting
Yeah.
it.
yeah, so I move we're happy with Travis's
Okay.
finding and that you don't need to bring language back to the planning commission for action.
Anybody disagree with just letting Travis do what he's been doing with this? Okay, guess you're okay.
Okay.
Good, that's done.
Okay, so other item for discussion today, or the second item on the agenda. Sorry, do you want to go ahead and read that into the record, and I'll do my
Okay.
presentation?
Yeah, okay. Next, we have on the agenda the workshop on a comprehensive plan update. Staff report.
Okay. So, the package that you have in front of you, which starts on page 23 of 89, so that's your package. I wanted to give you some background on the public participation process that I see upcoming. And the first thing I put in that package is, rather than trying to give you documents repetitively or call them by a name or dates, what I decided to do is I would number them and start calling them document number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And when I deliver them to you, you will get them with a agenda memo cover sheet so that you can identify what document that covers. And we will be setting up a website which will allow anyone to follow along this process by going onto the website and clicking on document number 7 and being able to see a PDF of that individual document. That will make things simpler for us because when we actually start holding public hearings, I will be able to provide you with a complete record without having to print hundreds of pages of paper every time we get together and have this discussion. So we'll adopt them by reference because they're publicly available and already in the record at that point. So that's what that first page, the list of documents. When I start talking about document numbers, you'll know what I'm talking about. So what we're here to talk about tonight is not a public hearing on the actual comprehensive plan amendments. I wanted to get your input and buy-off on the public participation plan that I intend to engage in as part of the update process. And so the first step of that is I put together a list of stakeholders and interested parties. And this is continuing to evolve as I go along. And that first section there will be people that I talk to. Anybody who signs on this sign-in sheet will be added to that list so that we have a record of who's heard at least parts of the presentation and been involved in the process. The second section there is a list of stakeholders, groups, and agencies and advisory commissions, advisory boards that I will be engaging in this process. And when I produce this list, I've actually added to it considerably, and by quirk of timing, I met this morning with the Woodland of Our Future group at 9 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock, I went and made a quick presentation at the Cowlitz County Diking Improvement District number 2. They had their monthly meeting today, so I spent some time with them kind of talking about what I'll be talking with you. But I'll be able to document that as I engage these groups, that we'll have a record of who's been involved with the process. And the next section is agency contacts and staff who are involved. And then the last one is the list of applicants and applicant contacts, and that'll continue to evolve as this process continues. So I wanted to develop kind of a single list that will grow as our outreach and education effort takes flight. So one of the things that I'm going to be asking you tonight is if you've had a chance to take a look at that list, if there's any groups that I need to be doing outreach to that are not on that list, that if you could send that information to me or give it to me now.
Yes, I'd like to have the library.
Okay, library, good. And also I've added Fire District, Cowlitz County Fire District number 1. And I have also added, somebody asked me to add Ed Orcutt and the other elected representatives who represent the city of Woodland and Cowlitz County.
I think that's an excellent idea.
So if you can think of anybody else who's not on that list, I will be more than happy to include them and engage them and find out when their next meeting is. And so if you have anything on those, one thing that I am doing is in this section of stakeholders groups, as I engage them, I will take the gray shading off. So if you see, so for example, the next time you see this list, the Dike Improvement District number 2 will no longer be gray, it will be white, and I will state the date and time that I engaged them. And coincidentally, you'll start seeing the Dike District board, you'll see their names up here in the contacts, people that are now getting copies or notifications when when hearings are held. So that's kind of helping to keep track of who I've engaged and who's been part of this process.
So you mentioned a website. So the planning commission, to keep apprised and keep up to date, can go to that website and see where you are at any given point.
Yes. So that's a great point, because in preparing our packet to send it to you, Janice made me understand something that I didn't necessarily realize, and that is, as I give her documents, she can't package them and send them to you until it's one complete package. And then it numbers them 1 to 89, and I can't add something in the middle because that's not how it works. So what we talked about today is we are actually going to go to the city website, and instead of having to log in to where you get your minutes and where you see the videos from, you will just be able to go to the city's website, and there should be a link that will drop you to like a community development page, and it will describe what we're engaging in, and then it'll describe all the documents that we've accumulated in the contact list up to this point. So rather than having to search around and find stuff that's hidden in our website, it should be like a 1 or a 2 click. You'll be able to take a look at all of these documents individually. Instead of page 1 through 89, you'll be able to pick 4 pages here or 6 pages
So
there.
that will give us a head start to see what's happening, is I didn't get my packet until yesterday at 4:50, and there doesn't leave me a lot of time to do anything.
Yes, and part of the reason for that is because of the port project, and we had some issues come up during the SEPA review, and they are considering a new avenue of approach for stormwater design. So, and they kind of were open to get stuff done and not, and so, you know, it was one of those things where, you know, it's only 1 page of the packet now, but if it was yesterday, it might be another 60 pages that we would have printed 20
But
copies
it would
of.
be very helpful as commissioners to be able to, rather than wait for an entire packet to go to something, and then be really prepared and then if there's some last minute thing, you can always deal with that. But
Yes.
it puts us at a tremendous disadvantage when you're given.
If I may say something here, most of the packet was in place on the website, so you could have gone and viewed the documents and printed them if you wanted to before I said that it was complete, because I attached the documents as soon as they're ready. So some of that stuff was up there 2 weeks ago, some of it was up there 1 week ago, and then the final documents I didn't receive until yesterday, so that's fine.
Okay, that would have been helpful when I came in Tuesday morning for you to say, hey, there's a bunch of stuff that you can look at.
I didn't even think of it.
Right, right. But I
I'm sorry
mean,
about that.
We're trying to be,
Yes. And
Yes.
as far as the links on the website to the documents for the comprehensive plan, that is not in place yet, but it should be coming very soon. As soon as it is in place, we'll send you a notification to let you know exactly how to get there.
great, thank you.
Okay, so does anybody have any feedback on kind of that list or the outreach?
I noted some typos.
Oh, yes, sorry, I also noticed some typos, and they have been corrected from last week's version to this week's version. Okay, so the first item, starting on page 27, is the public participation plan that is in our current comprehensive plan. What's important to remember here is we actually have a couple actions that we're going to be engaged in. One is we have 8 applications to make changes to our comprehensive plan map. And we also have an application to change comprehensive plan text. But certain things like the public participation plan, we're not necessarily going to have to make changes to this plan. And that's why I did this document, so that you would understand that what our comprehensive plan says is we have to do certain activities like engage the public as often as possible, that we want to get a broad participation across the community as much as we can. We want to engage our stakeholders, and we want to be prepared looking at the codes we have in place, so that when we start addressing the specific projects, will be able to have that framework. So this section, I think it's through page 30, is kind of my analysis of the comprehensive plan, public participation plan, which is outlined in the next few pages. So I did an analysis, and I included the actual language that I was kind of applying. So what you should be able to do, or if you've already done this, you should be able to take a look at what I plan on doing to address each one of the issues that are on in Chapter 2 of the comprehensive plan. So it includes that list, that preliminary list of the stakeholders and the Planning Commission upcoming meetings where we expect to be discussing the comprehensive plan, and then my efforts, which include open houses October, November, December, public meetings to gather input on what we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, what I call the growth scenarios, and then public notices, surveys, and email distribution of materials and that kind of stuff. So that kind of gives you an idea of what I will be doing as part of the public engagement process for the comprehensive plan update. Are there any questions about this portion? Or do you think I've missed anything? Or especially if you think that there's stuff in the comprehensive plan that I'm missing, now is the time to let me know, because I can correct it and I can do more outreach and education.
So how many meetings are you thinking, public meetings, just as many as you feel
So,
are necessary? Or?
So I think what's important. Okay, so I'll back up and I'll have a quick conversation about what I'm thinking. We have a series of applications. At this point, we have 8. I think I expect one more. They've submitted their documentation, but they haven't paid their fee, so should be paying that pretty quick. Ideally, in a normal world of current planning, is when an application comes in the door, I process them in the order they come in, and under the existing comprehensive plan and the existing zoning, I would determine whether or not it meets those standards. In this case, they're requesting a change to the comprehensive plan, which is a policy in a legislative document. So how I envision this process going is we need to engage in a policy and a direction discussion with the community. We need to figure out, when Woodland grows up, what do we want to be? Where do we want to be in 20 years? And that's a policy big picture discussion that I'm going to need some guidance from the Planning Commission and City Council as to what they see our future being. Will there be any expansion? If there is expansion of our growth area, how big will it be? And the growth scenarios that we're going to talk about, that's I've envisioned the 6 scenarios in document 4. And the question, once we settle that and you give me direction as to how big you want the city to plan to be, I will then take each of those applications and compare it to what your new vision for the community is. So rather than answering project by project, is this one good for Woodland's 20-year future? I want you to tell me what's good for Woodland's 20-year vision. And then we'll start looking for the projects that seem consistent with what Woodland wants to be in 20 years. So that's kind of how I envision this happening. And is that, any questions about that? I'm kind of bleeding into the next section of the next document. Any thoughts?
So if the planning commission doesn't go to these meetings or something, I mean, everything comes back to us.
So I will bring you synopsis of what we're talking about, and I'll give you feedback and notes and what I'm hearing in the community. And the primary purpose, like when I went to the Dyking District today, to tell them this process is starting. If it's important to the Dyking District to know how much impervious surface they're going to have in their Dyking District, pay attention. look at the paper, read the articles, pay attention to the notices that are posted around town, and give me a call and check your emails when I send you something about open house at the high school. They now know, they're on notice that they've been invited to come participate.
All right, I'm thinking about Clark County specifically,
Yep.
because, I mean, that plays a big part, and they have to buy off on what we do. Now, is there a hierarchy, there's a priority list, some people, I mean, Clark County rates above the docking district type thing. I mean, because they have the ability to,
So,
help me understand this, I just want to make
okay,
sure.
so you're getting into some really interesting questions, and that's part of the reason why the city's attorney is here today. There are documents, and specifically document 6 in your package was adopted in 2002 when the city and the county negotiated the comprehensive plan and updated the urban growth boundaries that were in existence then. And this document seems to imply that in the future, the city of Woodland can expand its urban growth boundaries, but when we make the changes to our comprehensive plan, when the planning commission makes their recommendation and the city council makes the decision, that's not really a decision. We turn it over to the county planning commission, who
That was
and
my understanding, and that's why I'm bringing it up.
they can shoot it down, they
Right.
can make it bigger, they can make it smaller, and if they don't like it or they like it, they can send it to the county council, who can actually make the final decision. And it raises a lot of interesting questions,
It does.
because there are signatures on that document from the county, but there are no signatures on that document with the city.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, interesting questions, and we recognize that, we're gonna wrestle with that, but that's more of a procedural part on our part. At this stage, we can still continue to grab the data and,
Okay, so my next question, and I'm not going to take a lot of time because I know, I mean, I'm familiar with, that's why I brought these issues up. But, Clark County has been, no, I'm talking about, I'm talking about Clark
Clark.
and Cowlitz. But Clark County has been particularly, they've tabled in, pushed things back, and I mean, that's the reputation. So, do we have any kind of,
Yes, we do.
we do, okay. To keep them,
I mean, same thing when they revised their comprehensive plan, we didn't ask for any expansion into the urban growth boundary into Clark County, so we have the same sort of limitation. Because in 2016, we said we didn't want to expand our urban
Right,
growth boundaries.
right.
So both counties have us down that we don't want to expand our urban growth boundary.
yeah.
but Cowlitz has been more,
But Clark did the same thing.
right, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we have a tug of war here on several fronts, because Clark County is fully planning under GMA, and Cowlitz County is not.
Right,
So technically, I've heard from people who may speak for the county that the county doesn't necessarily recognize growth areas because that's a GMA tool. Clark County, when I talked to their staff, their initial reaction was, your comp plan has to be GMA because you've got a toe in Clark County.
that's exactly right, yeah.
But since you're expanding into Cowlitz County, we really don't care, it's not that important.
Okay.
And since then, I've got a call from the Clark County Community Planning Office saying, we need to have a conversation, because if you're gonna expand into Clark County, we need to know, we need to account for it. Earlier in this year, when I went to a joint Clark County Planning Commission City Council meeting, they were having a debate whether they wanted to update their 45-year vision document or their 20-year comprehensive plan document. And they're talking, maybe a year or two and $2 million worth of effort. And from our point of view, if we're trying to get this done in, 3 to 6 months, and they're taking 2 years, that may
Right.
be incompatible.
And that's exactly why I brought this up.
And so we have an appointment to talk to the planning staff, October 12th. They are on our contact of stakeholders list, so we will be going to talk to them. I fully expect that I'm gonna have to go to the planning commission and state what we're doing. And my expectation is with that in the back of their mind, they're either going to have to accommodate our timeline, or we're not gonna be able to expand into Clark County, and that's just because it's inconsistent with their comprehensive plan.
And that's kind of been their modus operandi for a while, you know, I mean, they're the big dogs, so.
Yes, and under growth management, they theoretically get an allotment of growth, and let's just pull a number out of the air, of 50,000 additional people over the next 20 years. It's then up to the county to allot that to the different jurisdictions. So you have Washougal and Camas and Vancouver and La Center and Woodland and Brush Prairie, or the rural centers, all jostling for a piece of that pie that's been allocated under growth management. And then once they get numbers, and historically the city of Woodland has got zero growth projection from that Clark County allotment. So even if we were to annex within Horseshoe Lake, that's Clark County. And if we were to build additional houses there, I'm not sure exactly what kind of a crisis that creates, because they've allotted no growth to Woodland. But if we annex and start building houses, we could technically be in violation of their comprehensive plan, because they didn't plan for us to have any growth.
Right, I've already looked into this and you're right.
Yes, so I'm not sure what that means, but we're already in that boat, so.
But it is within our urban growth boundary.
Yes, yeah, so.
Projected. Okay,
So,
thanks.
and also, somebody suggested that I contact the Growth Management Hearings Board and have a conversation with them, because if we end up, heaven forbid that we get appealed and it goes to the Growth Management Hearings Board, I would rather them know what we're doing ahead of time and they can give me advice, rather than waiting until the last minute and surprising them.
Right, I think we have to be preemptive.
Yeah. Which is the whole point of planning, right? That's why I'm here.
I have a question
Yeah.
concerning this just a little bit. So, I mean, if the city, hello? Hello, can you, if the city, just does, do what we do, and then Clark County comes in and says, well, we don't like what you're doing in Clark County, does that derail the whole thing, or can we just keep going with whatever we want to do in Clark County, Cowlitz County, and just kind of not do that part and deal with them down the road?
Under growth management, and Frank can weigh in on this, you have a different opinion or a wiser opinion than myself, but there are responsibilities that are afforded to different levels of jurisdictions. The county does have some responsibility for oversight and making sure that our comprehensive plan is consistent with their comprehensive plan, which is where their advice at this point is relevant, and that is, if we are not changing our Clark County footprint, we would be consistent with their comprehensive plan, because we're already in their comprehensive plan. Cowlitz County doesn't necessarily have that same requirement, but they have this 2002 document where we seem to have kind of given them the authority to have the yay or nay over us. So it may not be GMA legislation, it might just be this agreement. So that's something we're going to have to be aware of, and my plan to address that is the public participation process. I will engage them early and often so that they understand what's coming, so that they can tell me on day 10 that they see a problem, rather than the final day and the public hearing. So
I really
that's how I
agree with
plan
your
on handling
strategy.
that.
It's a good strategy.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Like a dumb question, but, so the city has expanded into Clark County because we finally have a park on the Beaux-Arts side of the bridge. Do they care about that?
So that is city-owned property. And
Outside city limits?
outside the city limits. And the county would treat us like any other applicant. If we wanted to build a house on that property, we would go to Clark County on a building permit and a shoreline permit, and we would have to be
So there are permits on file from Clark County for the improvements made in the park?
For anything that triggered a permit, yes, we would go after those.
Are you looking for us to say, all right, let's move forward Is that what you're looking for this evening?
Part of.
Just to cut to the quick here.
Yes, and so the last section of each one of these is kind of a list of potential actions or questions.
Each of the pages?
Each of the individual documents. And that, like for this one specifically, do you think I've meet the spirit and the intent of Chapter 2 of the comprehensive plan? Is there anybody else you think I need to contact? Is there, so we can go through those one by one if you like, but
Is it appropriate to move to hold a public hearing on document 1? Is that what you're looking for? Or
if you want me to.
for an up and down vote for
If you
that
want-
agenda item?
If you want me to, my assumption is as part of the actual process during a public hearing, I will do a quick synopsis of this and present it as part of a larger conversation rather than focusing on this. My intent here is to make sure that the work that I'm about to embark on meets your expectations for what you want me to do. Is it not enough? Is it too much? Am I missing things? So literally this is a work session where you can tell me to add stuff or delete stuff or make it faster or slow down.
It was really quick trying to get this read today. Did I see in here, in document 5, are you talking about changing the urban growth boundary?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
So they're numbered.
and that's really going to be the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk
Okay.
about tonight. So document 4 is simply the pages of the city code, which essentially implements what's in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is the policy, and document 4 talks about Woodland Municipal Code, section 17.84. That's the actual process for processing the applications and the expectations for the applications.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So when we got with our joint meeting with the city council, you know, our marching orders were really to update the code, and 17 needs updating, for sure. So I'm all for, I understand the importance of the comprehensive plan, but should the code be updated prior to moving forward with this, so that when we get our comprehensive plan updated, our code is the way we want it to attract the development and the design and the architectural and all the different elements. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing.
Yes. I envision that some of that will occur, and you will inevitably find stuff on our retooling our code list that you want discussed or you would like to see changed as this process comes along. So
Okay,
they're
so
not
one of our
mutu-
things
they're
was,
not
let me
mutually
give by
exclusive.
example, our high-density residential. That was the chief marching orders from that meeting. Now, if we update our comprehensive code before we update the high-density residential, are we leaving ourselves open to undesirable development potentially?
So, we always leave ourselves open to that, and even if we update the codes that we're concerned about, we could still be open to that. And this was raised when we were trying to have our conversation about the residential zones, which theoretically hasn't finished. However, I don't have a problem with us having this generic conversation about the city's direction and policies, because part of the justification for updating the code is the code is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan or the stated policies or goals of the comprehensive plan.
All right, I understand that there's a number of applications pending and they're waiting for the comp plan. I understand that. But it would seem to me that our code, to me, is really outdated, and it really needs some serious work. So if we don't update the code, that would allow potential development that does not meet the future goals and the direction we want to go in Woodland in terms of architectural and all these other issues. And that's a concern I have. So if you can address it, that'd be great. But I'm really concerned about it.
I don't see why it can't all happen at once.
Too much work.
Huh?
It's too much work.
Too much work? I mean, before the comprehensive plan is approved, then you could say, well, maybe we need to take care of these issues because it's going to be a problem. But since we don't even know, what changes would be made, it just seems kind of like we're talking about problems
I've
that
read
don't
the
exist
code.
yet.
Well, but that's an incorrect assumption, because I've read the comprehensive plan in depth and I've read the code in depth. And there are issues here that are just, we just can't brush over. We have to address these issues, because the future of Woodland and what the kind of city we want to be is very dependent on the code and the comprehensive plan. So it's not something you could say, oh, well, it's a serious
What-
issue.
If you're going to, which is more, they both have to work in harmony, right? Is what
Yes.
you're saying?
But they don't.
But
They don't, but that's kind of the goal, I think, is what you're saying, to work both things out. I guess I just don't understand. You're trying to say, let's not work on the comprehensive plan until...
No, I know, I want to expand our urban growth boundary, I want to update our comp plan, but I have gone through all of our codes, and we need to deal with the code in a parallel fashion to make sure that the final document is consistent with the kind of Woodland that we want.
I agree with you that there are a lot of things that we can and should fix, and I don't know that we necessarily are in a position where we have to do them one and then the other. And the reason why I believe that is because there are some code sections which will address your concerns. For example, our zoning code doesn't apply until they annex to the city. So I had mentioned that there's really kind of two sides to this coin. There's the map update, changing our growth boundary, and then there's the text update so that we can add policies if you see fit that prior to annexation, or if prior to annexation of a multifamily zone property, we could require that we update our PURD. So that might be a policy that you propose, and if the city council agrees, then it just means that anybody who wants to do multi or high density wouldn't be able to annex until we fixed our code. Whether that's 6 months or 6 years, it puts some projects in kind of a holding pattern. But we would decide when they annex based upon, once the code is updated, we're open for business in high density or medium density residential. So that's
Well,
one way to handle it.
Okay.
The other thing, and our code specifically says that in order to get a rezone, it has to be accompanied by a proposal, a site plan development proposal. So you would be able to take a look at an application that wants to annex and zone to high density residential. And if you feel it doesn't meet the standards, you would be able to say, you know what, you're not ready for a zone change, and that as long as we have legal grounds to deny the zone change and to deny the site plan. So there are those tools in place for us to, just because they get in the urban growth boundary doesn't guarantee that they're going to be able to develop when and where they want,
And the style they want.
and the style that they want.
I think
Travis-
this merits great, more in-depth discussion, maybe not tonight, but as we move along.
So you're looking at a comprehensive plan change to allow us to expand our urban growth boundaries. Step one. So you're talking about a comprehensive plan change, moving through the planning commission, public hearing, can't go to city council until January 2019. City council has to have 2 readings. That would, so best case scenario we're looking at the present time is probably 6 to 8 months to move it through the process of adopting a comprehensive plan change, which would allow you to then process these applications you have.
Well, theoretically, they would follow on in very close succession to that and may even be at the same hearing. So you might be asked to take a look at what growth scenario, once you're comfortable with that and you've adopted, you would be able to move on to the individual applications to determine whether they're consistent with that growth scenario that you've adopted.
But it wouldn't make any difference until the planning commissions of
Yes.
possibly both counties move on this.
Yes. And ultimately, the applicants, just because they made it into the growth boundary, doesn't guarantee them that they can annex or
And so that's my
develop.
next question. So then annexation is approximately 10 months to a year.
Yes.
And so when would an applicant for annexation be subject to, when would they be vested in the codes that would require density, parking, style? I mean, I kind of go like, this is too much work, but in actuality, we have an 18-month window to adopt new code language.
It's one of the interesting questions that I've been wrestling with, because theoretically, vesting normally occurs when you submit a fully complete application.
When it's
However-
accepted by the city.
However, if you were to apply for a subdivision and a rezone at the same time, which is what our code requires, we would have to make a decision on the zone change or the annexation,
Mhm.
and they would theoretically have to waive their vesting until we make that decision. And so, let's say that they applied today for both a subdivision and a zone change.
Which would only be somebody who is already inside
growth
the city
area.
limits.
Absolutely.
City limits, not growth boundary, city
Yes.
limit, correct?
So if they wanted to go from,
I
say,
didn't understand your answer to that question. That's a very important question.
okay,
Mhm.
and so if you apply for your subdivision and you're applying for your zone change at the same time,
But why would you be applying for a zone change if you're outside of the city limits?
well, you're right, annexation, well, for a zone change, we have some internal applicants who want to go from commercial to industrial, or sorry, from commercial to residential. So to qualify for a zone change, you have to show what your development plan is going to be for that site. So you will be able to look at that commercial piece of property and see what it would look like as a residential
Mhm.
district before you make your decision. That applicant cannot vest when they apply, because vesting a residential subdivision to a zoning of commercial,
Right,
I can't approve that.
right.
It has to be residential before I can approve a residential subdivision.
So it's going to be a consecutive.
Yes. So in that case, we're moving the goalpost on them until, if you give them residential
Mhm.
zoning, I would then compare their subdivision to their residential zoning that just got approved 10 minutes ago, and is it consistent with that code? You can make a motion and determine that.
So we don't increase liability to the city by somebody coming in, and we haven't changed the code, and they want to build according to the old code, and all of a sudden, I mean, to me, that's kind of puts the city in a risk management issue, because if the code's there and hasn't been changed, they can build according to the old code.
So,
Yes.
my understanding of vesting is you are vested when you submit your applications, but an applicant can waive their vesting. And
Why would they?
Frank might be able to give me an opinion on that. Because in this example, if you have a commercial piece of property and you want a residential subdivision, vesting to the commercial code does you no good.
Oh, I understand, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'm just talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but inside the city limits, we're probably looking at an 18-month window. Outside the city limits, probably longer.
No,
Or outside the urban growth boundary at the present time, we're probably looking at a longer time period.
potentially, yes. And because theoretically, there's multiple steps in the process. There's pre-application, preliminary approval, final approval, and construction, and then they get to their building permits. So some of them might take 18 months to get to final plating. Some of them might take 18 months to get, to their annexation
You mean preliminary planning?
or final. I was actually
I don't
thinking
think anybody's
final.
going to get to
Yeah.
final in 18 months.
But there are some internal applicants, or if you're immediately adjacent to the city boundary, it might be very, very quick for if they show up in, let's say, April 1st, and the planning commission or the city council approves the growth boundary expansion, depending on what our answers from the county are, and depending on whether we get appealed or,
Right.
but yeah, theoretically, they could apply in April, and if they're
Apply for what? Annexation?
apply for annexation and zone change and subdivision as one packet, they could theoretically be 90 days from their public hearing.
Who has jurisdiction if you're not annexed? How can you consider a permit when annexation hasn't occurred?
That's a great question. Our-
Well, I mean, you don't have jurisdiction. It's not inside the city limits. Who do they apply to? The county?
So, and this gets to that question of vesting, because they wouldn't be vested. They would have to say, upon annexation, that that they're trying to shoot moving goalposts as they move. So, yeah, so these are some questions that are going to be coming up. Ideally, from my point of view, what we will do is update our comprehensive plan, and then somebody would apply for an annexation, and then I would get a decision on the annexation. Then they would apply for a rezone, and then we might, if they needed one. But they could also establish zoning as part of their annexation. And then they would apply for a subdivision, and so my life would be a lot easier if I had 4 consecutive applications and nothing overlapped.
It's a lot of what ifs.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. I think what if the county jumps in? What if zoning problems? And why don't we, I think, it seems like we're approaching the problem. I know you want some direction and everything, but seems like the big question is, are we going to change, is all this development going to happen south of town? Are we going to annex all this area? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And then figure out all these problems. Because if people aren't interested in expanding the urban growth boundary, these are all questions that are never going to come up.
Oh, well,
Right?
I can pretty much tell you that.
And we actually have applicants in the audience, so
Yes.
that as we have this conversation, they're listening, and kind of the last thing, as you do here, is you might want to throw it out and see if they have any comments and have some interaction with them as part of the public participation process. Engage them. and
So you
see
want
if
us
they
to
have
invite
opinions.
the ex parte communications?
What's that?
I said you want us to invite the ex parte communication? Is that your recommendation to us?
Ex parte communications is when you're in a quasi-judicial function.
So workshop is okay?
Workshops,
Not
okay.
not quasi-judicial.
I mean, that's the purpose, is to get the public
Okay.
input. You're not committing to anything tonight, you're just studying the issue.
Right, and that's part of our agenda, to have
So-
comments from the,
I mean, don't you want to formulate a plan and then present that plan to the public
No, you
and have public discussion? I mean, or what do you want to present 5 options to the public, or you just want to go out and say, what do you guys want to do? Do you want to do this or that?
he has
I don't
options.
understand.
He
There
ha-
are 5 options.
He has
Yeah,
options.
I
Yeah.
think I'd rather go to that
So could we, maybe we
and
could.
talk about that.
Maybe we could get to the options, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And just so you know, this is the exact
I mean, I'm
kind
not
of
sure.
conversation that I need to hear and have right now. So this is exactly
Yeah,
what
this
I
is
was.
the purpose of the
Yes,
workshop.
this is
to bring
exactly
these
what I was
issues
looking
up,
for.
so.
Okay,
Yeah, I guess.
so
Yeah.
document 5 is the 6 potential growth scenarios that I see the city moving forward and looking at. And they are numbered from the smallest to the largest of impacts. And
Excuse me, document 5 starts on which page?
41.
Okay.
And it's actually the written agenda summary and the maps that I gave you today. We got those from our GIS technician, and they kind of show each of them, but they might be subtle, so I'll walk through each one of them. Document 1 is, you could decide that the city should not expand its boundaries, that we have enough land within our current urban growth area and city limits that we can accommodate the growth that we desire in our comprehensive plan. That's what they concluded a couple of years ago, and that's how we got the comprehensive plan that we have.
Is that a decision we can make to not grow? Don't we, I mean, is that a
To not-
legitimate answer under the Growth Management Act, which Clark County would be a part of? Can we really make a decision that we are not going to grow? I always thought that decision of the comprehensive plan was,
I think both counties would love it because it simplifies their lives.
but that wasn't the question. The
Do I
question
think
was,
it's-
doesn't the Growth Management Act require us to plan for growth?
It does, but we are only partially planning under growth management. So,
Right.
unlike Clark County, is we don't have to take an allotment of population if we grow by 30 or if we grow by 3,000. Growth management doesn't dictate what we plan for, because we are a different animal. We are only partially planning for our Cowlitz County space. But, again, that's part of the debate that I'm having with the Department of Commerce in Clark County and Cowlitz County, is nobody really wants to address that issue head on. My belief is growth scenario 1 is going to be really hard for me as a staff member to write a staff report that supports number 1. Because fundamentally, being new to the city, I've noticed that there seems to be a statement of kind of our desired direction and goals in the text, and our map appears to be completely inconsistent with what we've said we want in the text.
And if you look at the population expectations for 20 years, this was just approved in 2016, we're already,
And that's really my question is, whatever option we choose, we must be able to support that, in fact. We can't just arbitrarily say, we don't want to grow.
Yes. And that's why I've laid out these scenarios, is because I can do analysis to figure out and give you a recommendation as to which one would best suit us. But I need to recognize that there are multiple scenarios that may not be supported by some analysis, and the opinion and the direction and the political will of the city of Woodland may be, that may be how we ended up with the map that we have, is we have the legislative will to implement this comprehensive plan, but we don't have the legislative will to adopt a map that reflects our stated vision.
all right, let me just inject one thing, because it's a question I'm gonna have when we get to these maps. So if you have a bunch of residential developers and, but you don't have anybody coming asking for more industrial property, isn't it incumbent upon you and the planning commission to factor in those issues that are critical to the future of Woodland, but not necessarily pending as an application?
Sure. And you're making a really good point, which is what I've been kind of expressing as I talk to people about this, and that is, like, for example, we are doing an RFP to get a water and sewer analysis about extending our water and sewer services across the railroad tracks and into the industrial area that is west of
I'm aware of that.
the train tracks.
Right.
And part of that analysis is going to be what size pipes, what size pump stations, what water pressure.
Those are critical questions. You can't put a 2-inch line and expect to serve an industrial
And those are
area.
critical questions. My concern is that without kind of having chose one of these scenarios for the next 20 years, putting in a 4-inch pipe would be as dumb as putting in a 2-inch pipe, or a 6-inch pipe, or an 8-inch pipe.
I get
If we really need a 10-inch pipe,
Right.
we need to understand that now so that we're not doing that report every 5 years.
And that's why I'm bringing this up, because those are the issues that we need to be
Yes,
prepared
yes.
to deal with as a planning commission, to serve the public.
Yes, and larger pipes may not be relevant at the north end of town, but at the south end of town might be really relevant. So if we're having these studies done, let's really talk about a 20-year plan as opposed to what do we need to get to the industrial district in the next 5 years.
Right.
So scenario number 2 is a little larger in that we are only going to entertain internal comprehensive plan changes that accommodate for additional growth. So we could do some low-density residential to medium or to high-density residential, or commercial to residential, or residential to commercial, that we're going to accommodate our growth within our existing limits by changing our comprehensive plan. So it's like number 1, but it's it gives a little ground for growth. Scenario.
We need to improve our economic base, and neither 1 nor 2 addresses
Well,
those issues in any
oh,
kind of.
Yeah, and you brought that up, and I'm sorry, there are some handouts on the back table, and I should have given you a copy, but I didn't. But it's table 3.1 from our comprehensive plan. And what the comprehensive plan says is that we estimate that we're going to have, I believe it's about 5,000 additional commercial and industrial jobs on the land base that's currently available within the city. So for example, west of the train tracks, there's a lot of industrial land where we're going to attract jobs when the utilities are available. So that same paragraph goes on to say that the existing residential land that's left within the city, we're going to have 1,200 units of housing within the city boundary. So according to that analysis, it is possible for us to accommodate all of our growth without expanding the boundary. I've done some quick mathematics and I don't see it. So, but this assumes that we could convert some like commercial pieces to high-density residential, and we actually have a couple applicants who are requesting that. And so it is possible that we could handle quite a bit of growth within the city, but we would be sacrificing commercial or industrial for residential.
And you still have to think 20 years.
And part of this process is I need to do that analysis,
Right.
but doing it in a vacuum doesn't make much sense. So thank you, Frank. Frank handed that out. So table 3.1, these are the woodland planning assumptions, which are kind of some of the basic framework of our comprehensive plan. And the top 2 lines are the 2015 population and our projected 2036 population, and that goes from 5,700 to 9,200. So that's about
I mean, that's just kind of awful.
within our existing boundaries and our growth area.
Yeah.
That's the first red light that came up for me. The problem.
Why is that a red light? Red light, what do you mean?
Because 3,500 people would assume that we're going to be able to get about, and you see farther down, the estimate at that time is we had 174 acres of vacant land. And if the low density developed at 4 units per acre and the high density developed at 20 units per acre, we would be able to put in about 1,280 housing units on those 174 acres. But when you actually look at those acres, some of them are up on McCracken, they're nice big houses on nice big lots. They may not necessarily want to tear down those houses and put up condos or townhomes or, you know,
This-
6,000 square
Like,
foot
we
lots.
have to grow to 9,000 people or something?
No, we don't have to. And we could very well not expand our boundaries, and we could not build houses, and therefore our population would never grow because there's no houses available.
That's right.
So we could control growth by not allowing residential development. And that's why item number 1 is on that list, because if you don't think the city should grow, you are one of the 5 people that
I
can
don't-
influence the city council.
I don't know if that's really the issue, like, should the city grow or should it not? As much as the area around us, do we want to control what happens in the area around us, or do we want other people to make those decisions, like the county? And I think we want to be able to have a say and get some revenue and things like that from the area around us.
So that is a great segue to
Think.
the rest of the scenarios, because
I think that.
scenario 6 is that exact thing to the extreme. So, any questions about scenario 1, scenario 2? I think, okay. So scenario 3 is recognizing that, and we have a big map of it over there that probably shows it pretty well. All of the dark green are applicants who are interested in becoming part of our urban growth boundary. It includes some residential, it includes some industrial, and it includes some commercial. So theoretically, all 3 of the land uses are going to be part of this discussion. And scenario 3 assumes that when I do my math and we figure out what numbers you're comfortable with, if we say we need an extra 300 acres, and we have 1,000 acres of property who stepped forward, at some point you're going to have to pick some losers and pick some winners, and some applications are just not going to be consistent with our current model. And 5 years from now, they might make the cut. So at some point you're going to have to take a look at the numbers and feel what you're comfortable with. Scenario 4 assumes that you would be comfortable saying if you've applied, then we should include it in the growth boundary. And if it's way too much land, it just means we're planning for 50 years instead of 20. We can always do good planning farther out, but again, you know, a 6-inch pipe might be good for 10 years, but if we're looking at 20 years, then we should really look at a bigger picture so that we plan wisely. So 4 is an assumption that anybody who applied, or at some point you're going to be able to say, okay, if you applied, we're going to consider you for expansion of the growth area. My problem as a staff member is this looks like Swiss cheese, and it's going to be really hard for me to manage and to balance growth, which is why as staff, I summarily submitted a comp plan amendment application, and staff is going to recommend that we do a logical extension of the boundary so that we capture all of the holes and bring them in for part of the discussion. They may not think they want to be part of the city, or they may not want to be part of the city, but I should still make sure that the pipes are sized properly and that the road right-of-way is the right width, and that when they change their mind or when the kids inherit the property and the kids want to sell, that I'm not in a position where I have to tell them no. We've planned for it and we're thinking far enough ahead. That's what scenario 5 is looking at.
So it's really a logical approach.
It is.
And a manageable approach to growth.
Yes. Now, 5 and 6 is kind of getting potentially beyond the realm of what I might be able to justify with analysis, but if we're not fully planning under GMA, we may be able to consider these options, and scenario 6 is that exact scenario. And that is everything within the bottoms, basically east of I-5 and the existing city limits. So all the way out to the Columbia River. All of that traffic is going to go through Woodland. And we are notoriously, infamous for not having considered our transportation impacts and the traffic that's occurring. We have traffic from North Clark County coming over CC and through exit 21. We have development in the county in the bottoms that's coming through the city to get to exit 21 and 22. And we have development in Cowlitz County that's coming down the highway and through exit 21. So we have all of these trips that are clearly impacting us. Scenario 6 might be a little bit too much, but it's kind of that effort for us to say what happens outside of our boundary. We should be paying attention and we should be planning for it. Now, we can't control what they do, but we could negotiate some kind of agreement with the county where we will be able to comment on all applications, and we could impose some city standards. So in other words, if they're doing a subdivision, they won't have to build the roads, but they have to develop or dedicate right-of-way so that in 50 years when the city goes out to the Columbia River, we will have enough room to build the roads that we need at that point. So influence versus control, we may never get that control, and we frankly may not get the support of the property owners out there. They don't want to be planning. And it's easier for them to not worry about city interference because they're in the county.
Right.
But we still have to deal with their impacts. So planning properly, that should be part of our discussion.
So 2 questions.
Okay.
Are we limited in the maps that you've shown us once we start the conversation? If we decide we want to go all the way to the Columbia River, we can?
Yes,
If we want to go into Clark County, we can?
we can ask for it.
Mhm.
Whether or not we could defend it and get it past appeals and growth management hearings board and all of those issues, we have to be realistic in what we're talking about. But the conversation from Clark County is along the lines of, would you ever extend your boundary into the county? And if so, let's talk about it. And the county comprehensive plan, Clark County, they could include a large chunk of land and set it aside as a future growth boundary for the city of Woodland. That way, if we ever change our comprehensive plan, they've already created the blank space for us to move into.
But shouldn't the interior of Horseshoe Lake, I mean, since it's already listed in Clark County in their huge plan, it's already in our plan as expanded urban, Woodland City expanded urban growth, wouldn't that be fairly easy to accomplish? Shouldn't it be?
It should be. And this is where I talk about the inconsistency in their plan, and that is, it could be annexed to the city, and if we put 100 people in 20 houses on that property, would their plan be out of compliance with growth management? I don't know. It's a really interesting question.
Because I've looked into this, and they've been really reluctant on these things, but it's already almost dedicated.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that the person who owns the lion's share of that property is not interested in annexation, because I've tried to sell him on it, and he's not interested at this point. So nobody's, and I started at the county in 1999, and I was told in 99 that that guy would never annex to the city, so we just assigned 0 population growth, and if the county had, it would be wasted population growth, because sure enough, it's never developed.
Got it.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean that that planning conundrum is not there, and someday it may explode in our faces, and we have to figure out what that means.
Just for some perspective, excuse me, like Ridgefield, for example, how big is their comprehensive plan? I mean, are they going all the way to the that casino and, you know, I mean, across the highway and, I
They
mean, the
act-
town of Ridgefield's a little town down there by the river,
No,
but,
it goes all the way across the freeway.
yeah, I mean, that's what,
Yep.
they've got everything. So why are they, you know, they're doing that, maybe we should too, right? I mean, just at least lay claim to it. It's right here in the bottoms. Whether it ever gets annexed or whether it ever really gets developed, I think is kind of putting the horse before the cart, or horse before the cart,
Yeah.
type of thing. I mean, if you're talking about how we should change our plan, I think that we should do what the other people in the region are doing, and they're trying to gain control over, in a sense, what's happening in their area. Does that make sense to any of you guys?
Oh, yeah.
That makes sense to you? How about
Yeah.
any of you guys? Does that make sense to?
What's the annexation rules nowadays? It's been so long since I've done an annexation. Is it assessed valuations?
So applicants can submit a letter of intent, and
Mhm.
they could submit a petition,
Mhm.
and the petition requires 65% of the ownership,
Ownership or assessed valuation?
I'm sorry, assessed valuation. Sorry, you're absolutely right. It has to be signed, petition has to be signed by 65% of the valuation.
Is that, pardon the expression for those of you who have farms, is that assessed valuation fair market value? Or is that, in the example of ag land, is that the depreciated value for the classification
I believe it's according to the assessor's database.
of fair market
Yes,
value, Allen, fair market value, ag value?
I don't know
Oh.
the answer to that specific question. I do know the city also on its own can initiate annexation. And
Okay.
it might be an alternative.
Big grab.
Big, big deal.
Yes, there's also the opportunity for a public vote for
So
annexation.
you're going to be having hearings, open houses, say, for the public, right? Are you going to be presenting all 6 of these then? Or just like if we decide on one, you're only going to be having that one?
What I envision for like the open houses is we will have displays like what's up there with poster sizes of each one.
Mhm.
And there will be Post-its, there will be comment cards for people to walk by and write their comments on a Post-it, and being able to say, I like this, I don't, and submit that information for me so that I can compile those comments individually. There'll also be displays and discussions about population projections and area, how much land, how to calculate densities. So that'll be a normal part of the conversation so that I can understand what the community desires, and so I can help give you feedback.
Aren't we supposed to figure that out?
We're supposed to listen.
No. Listen to what?
We're
Well,
supposed to listen to what the public wants.
There is a public participation
Well,
plan.
I know,
so-
but,
So we do need to
Yes.
have,
but don't,
To answer
aren't you
your
supposed to
question.
like say, well, here's what we think we should do, because we're the people who are looking at the data and looking at the problem, and we know more about it than other people. And maybe there's some couple different scenarios. I'm a little confused because,
But
I
no,
mean, it's
you're
like-
right, it is your job to ultimately choose. My job is to kind of prepare these scenarios and run some calculations to give you that first foothold. You can then decide, okay, if I do calculations for each of these scenarios, and you can dismiss 4 of them right off the bat, you can concentrate on the 2 that you think are the most viable, and you can add to it and add to the discussion, and ultimately your opinion might be version 7 or scenario 8.
Well, I'm not saying exclude the public. I'm
Oh.
just saying give a little bit of,
No, but part of my job is to gather that
Leadership.
public input and help educate my recommendation to you. So, yeah, you'll get my opinion, you'll get the public's opinion, and ultimately you'll add your opinion, and you'll vote according to what you think is the most applicable to what
Do you think
is
we
best
should
for the
attend these
community.
public meetings to get our own
You can
feel,
attend these meetings
or is
as
that
long as
something
there is,
that we're not, we should,
as long as there's not a quorum of you at any
that's what
single
I'm
meeting.
trying to get at, I don't want to.
You can go, but for example, I know that there are council members who go to the Chamber of Commerce meetings. I will be making presentations at the Chamber of Commerce. It's not like they have to skip those meetings because it's important that they're understanding what I'm saying to the community and that they're seeing the feedback without my filter when it comes to them.
Because eventually this will come before a quasi-judicial type.
So you will be making a recommendation theoretically on the growth scenario. And once I have that vision of what your vision of the future is, you will be asked to make a quasi-judicial decision
Right.
on each of the applications as to whether or not that's consistent with our future vision.
Got it.
So this part is not quasi-judicial.
Oh, I know that isn't,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to, so we don't disqualify ourselves in the future and put ourselves in a position where we
Yeah.
would have to recuse ourselves.
As long as there's not a quorum of you having a discussion or at a discussion about this topic, you're fine. Is that right? Always good to check with the lawyer.
But if they do the comp plan and then move on to the next phase without going to the council, they might reject the comp plan. Isn't that an issue?
So that's a great question. Procedurally, we might need to separate those. I hadn't thought that far in advance. My assumption is that you would be able to kind of pick a growth scenario, and then it would take me time to kind of do that analysis to tell you whether I think those individual applications are consistent with that vision.
All right, so I'm looking to both of you to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a position where down the road we would have to recuse ourselves or do something. So please keep that in mind as we move forward.
Have I said anything from the issue so far, or do you have any advice?
No, I mean, it's just, if you start mixing legislative and quasi-judicial functions, you create a difficult thing to navigate your way through, because as a legislative body, you're supposed to go out, talk to people, get input, think about that. When you're talking about quasi-judicial, it's radically different. You're not supposed to have ex parte
Right,
communications.
and we're really not a legislative body.
Right, and what I raised with Travis is sort of like to me, it may not make sense to do a comp plan and then the planning commission go on to the next quasi-judicial, because if it goes up and the comp plan is rejected by the council, who makes the ultimate decision, then all that effort was wasted.
No, I
Because then
get
it
you.
has to go back
I
with the
understand.
actual comp plan.
Huh.
Does that make sense?
Does to me.
Kinda. I mean, all this, I mean, I think public, yeah, I guess I'm backtracking a little bit. I'm not really sure what you're saying. We make recommendations to the.
Correct, ultimately, it's the council.
We don't really have any authority.
I mean, you're a study, you inform that, you get it going, but it seems
Right.
like what you ought to do is make your recommendations about the comp plan, send that up to the council, and then if they agree, then go on to the next stage. Because if you do both coming up together, I think you have a complicated mess.
And a great example is if you choose the no expansion of the urban growth area or urban growth boundary model, my analysis for those future applications is very simple. But if it goes to the city council and they say, no, we like option 6, I'm gonna have to go back and do all my calculations again because what they've adopted or what they accept will make me redo all of my calculus for my recommendation.
So the first thing we have to do is try to figure out which one of these options is in the best interest of the city, or what are you saying?
Best, yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about here is,
So do you want
That's
us
kind of
to
a
do
tall
that?
order.
We're not gonna do it now.
Right.
No, of course not.
So-
Well, we can talk about it, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, we're talking about. But we're going to wait and hear from the public input before we
Yes.
make it,
So
before
what
we
we're
give,
doing
we
today
decide.
is we're talking about whether you're satisfied that we have a path forward. So, do I engage the public? Do I talk about which scenario the public likes? Do I do the calculations to talk about how many acres do we need under scenario 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, whether or not those are defensible, and whether they're supported? And then we'll go out and talk to the community and find out what they like and what are the reasons they think the best planning scenario is.
Or do-
Which plan's gonna raise taxes and which plan is gonna lower taxes and, you know, I don't know what.
That will not
I
be
don't
part of my
understand. You're gonna go to
calculus,
the
but it'll
community
be
with
part of the
what?
conversation.
I mean, am I just not seeing something here, or what? What do you,
Well, you're going to the community to see what they want the future of Woodland to be.
in what
Boundary-wise.
terms of what?
In-
Like,
in acreage, in how large our boundaries are.
how, what do you want?
She doesn't know.
You don't know yet?
I mean, I haven't,
So
I haven't.
how are they supposed to know if we don't even know when we're supposed to be
Well-
the experts?
Well, part of the next step
Does that
is
not make sense, or?
part of the next step is I need to start doing the calculations. For example, with the expected population growth, how many acres of residential land do we need? And at what densities, and what does our zoning allow? So how much acreage of each zoning would we be looking at? Or also the other thing that's on this chart, and that is a 60% low density, 40% medium or high density multifamily housing ratio. Currently, we have 23% multifamily and 77% single-family residential. So right off the bat, part of my calculations will be how much more multifamily do we need just within the current city to kind of write that desired. So that will be part of your discussion. And then if we expand the boundary, we can't just do all single-family residential. We might need to do 40% multifamily and 60% resident, or
Why?
single-family.
Why? What are you talking about? To do what? To hit some kind of population
Yes.
target?
Yes.
Or, I mean, isn't it really, aren't we really talking about, the population target to me doesn't make any sense at all, right now. I mean, I don't know a lot about this stuff, to tell you the truth, but the bottom line is, if we have development and we have to build a new sewer plant, or we have to build a new water plant, and it's gonna cost a bunch of money and all our taxes are gonna go up, is that in our best interest? Okay? Or if it's gonna put a burden on our schools that we can't afford, is that in our best interest?
That's part of why it needs to be a dialogue with the public, because if you come up with a great plan, but no one wants any taxes raised, and that was based on taxes, then it's gonna crash and burn.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you want zero tax raises, that may limit some opportunities that people otherwise would be interested in.
But if nobody has any information, like if we do this, we think this is gonna happen. And if we.
That's true for all plans. I mean, you have no clear vision of the future. What you try and do is come up with the best that you have, and it's better to plan. I mean, the basic assumption is it's better to plan than not to plan and just hand everything on an ad hoc basis, because then you start having a lot more conflict that you might be able to avoid. But
Yeah, but-
planning is sort of an uncertain process.
Right, but you'll be dealing with increases in tax base, fees from developers, income to the city, what industrial properties could generate, how many people it could employ. That all factors into all of this on how you decide, your ratios of high density to industrial to, and
Yeah.
that's what's gonna, the public's gonna ask for that stuff, and that has to be part of your calculation.
Yes. Under normal circumstances, I would agree with you completely. Part of what I've found since I've got here, and that is when I ask some of the fundamental questions that I need to include in my calculations, we don't necessarily have the data
Yeah, I know that.
for me
I
to
know.
answer those questions. And at some point, we can do studies based upon our current boundaries, and maybe that's the logical thing to do. My concern is if those studies conclude that we need more sewer capacity, do we want to plan for that 5-year supply? Because we're not looking at a 20-year growth pattern? Because, for example, and I forgot to introduce him, the head of the school district is in the audience. He has a capital facilities plan for our current growth scenario, but based upon what we could be doing, it will significantly shift his view of the world. And he would like to know now so that he can start saving for future school construction, because that's a really important question for him. If
Your
we-
school board members would like
Oh, yeah, sorry, and the
Okay.
school board member, yeah.
So maybe this would be a good time to get input from the
Yes.
from the audience. Does anybody want to come up and talk about this? Okay. You know the drill, name, address, etc.
Sure. Steve Madsen, Aho Construction and Woodland School District, I guess, but I'm here on behalf of Aho Construction. My address is P.O. Box 26, physical address is 11610 Lewis River Road, Ariel, Washington 98603. Thank you for the opportunity. I know this is complicated, and I know it's difficult. First place I want to start is with the process itself, because I know it's just really difficult to wade through where the chickens start and where the eggs start. So if it helps you to think about it, the comprehensive plan has to come first, because the zoning ordinance theoretically implements the comprehensive plan. In other words, under the weight of law, where there's a conflict between, and under Washington state law, when there's a conflict between the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinance wins all the time. And so that's why it's important. Yes, it does create a problem, because somebody that makes an application is always vested under the existed zoning in place at the time they made the application. Now, I'm just speaking for our project and our proposal, which is the large group of properties south of the city. And so the way it would work is the city would adopt would theoretically adopt, and my personal preference would be option 5, but because we're going to get the least fight and get the most of what we want. I think it was President Reagan that said, "I'd rather have 80% of a loaf of bread than nothing." If the city adopts the comprehensive plan boundary expansion, then we would begin, first of all, we would then be justified financially and from a market standpoint in investing in the kinds of analysis for water, sewer, roads, even to the extent of being able to offer some infrastructure support to a potential school site in the area. So those would all be pluses in being able to manage that, and these are private sector resources that we're willing to commit. Now, none of that happens without this boundary expansion. Now, the reason the zoning, in my opinion, is not as important is, well, one, the resolution, which is ambiguous at best, I think, and in my conversation with the county attorney. It's his opinion. He'd like to see some amendments to it as well, so we'll see where that goes. But under the way things are set up right now, we could continue with our project under Cowlitz County zoning, existing zoning, that would work essentially in consultation with the city. Now, in
The city doesn't get any revenue.
Whoa, wait a minute. That's not. It sort of depends. This revenue in terms of what?
Tax.
Well, sure, because okay, so you're getting way ahead of the tax issue is okay. So just let me walk you through the process. It might you'll see how it benefits the city. So. First thing we do upon urban growth boundary adoption is submit a development application for subdivision. That'll include transportation, roads, sewer, water. There'll be extensive negotiations with how that all gets paid for and latecomer fees or whatever. And that's when the city has the ability to protect its ratepayer base, right? In other words, it doesn't need to give anybody sewer that's going to come out that's going to put the city in the red, and so that's the first line of defense, right? Is in the infrastructure. So while that process is all taking place, then the city clearly can work on its zoning code, so that 12 months, 18 months out, whatever it is, when we're actually ready to begin building, submitting for building permits. There's a zoning code in place that y'all like. Now, on the interim, what we've proposed, and this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but if the city goes with our proposal in terms of how this land gets actually released into the urban growth boundary, we would enter into a development agreement with the city, probably with the county as well, which would delineate some of the architectural things you might be concerned about, or some of the aesthetic issues. So, and that'll happen incrementally by phase, and any subdivision application brought through the county is going to come with a requirement that we enter into annexation agreements, so that any time the city wants to pull the trigger on annexing any of that property, it's simply a legislative function. There's no public input. There's no nothing. It comes up to a vote. This list of parcels gets annexed. You annex it, and we're perfectly comfortable with that. So that's how our process intends to work, and I guess I'm here to answer any other questions.
Would you rather be, from your standpoint,
Sure.
would you rather be annexed into the city and then do your development, or would you?
No, because the timing. Remember, what we all talk about 20-year plans and what we'd like things to look like. I have a 16-year-old daughter that's getting her driver's license, and she wants a car. I guarantee you the car I'm buying her is not the car she wants, but it is going to be the most practical car for her in her situation. In this case, what you have is market forces which are at play, which you have to consider. In other words, you're in a period when there are private sector resources willing to commit to all the infrastructure and all the kind of development that the city might like to have. And I guess the question is are you willing to take, I won't call it the risk, but are you willing to seize the opportunity at the time it's presented? And that's one thing that the Growth Management Act really doesn't get at very well.
But
And
you're talking about a development in Cowlitz County that doesn't have the growth management.
that's correct.
Okay, so.
And theoretically, my understanding of Cowlitz County zoning as it exists right now, and I can't speak to all the zoning on all of our parcels, but for a large majority of them that are unzoned, the Cowlitz County code is that the comp plan designation is small holdings, which would require that in order to do development on the scale we would like it to do, would be under what's called a planned unit development, which is provided for under that zoning. So you combine the PUD zoning in Cowlitz County with the resolution, and it pretty much gives you all the control you would want. Because, I mean, you almost have like dual veto authority, the city and the county, under the resolution under which we'd be developing. Yeah, it's worse for us because I've got to sell this project to 2 different jurisdictions, whereas normally I only have to sell it to 1.
Does the county, so if you do this development through the county without the city involvement? Like,
Oh no, it'll be with intimate city involvement.
oh, they can't.
That's the nature of the resolution, is that even though it's permitted through the county, it has to be built to city standards.
Who's going to provide and pay for services to your development?
That's going to be an interesting negotiation because we believe there's plenty of capacity. The issue is all going to run in, how big's the pump station, how big of pipes do we need to size, where can we get easements for all that stuff. But until we're in the UGA, you'll never know, and we'll never know, because nobody's ever going to commit the resources. We're talking, tens of thousands of dollars of private engineering resources to figure all that stuff out in conjunction with Travis and Tracy.
No, I understand that, but it's my understanding, based on previous discussions with you, is that you would like Woodland to extend those services to your proposed development. Am I incorrect?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm going to turn it over to my...
Houston Aho Construction, 5512 Northeast 109th Court, Suite 101, Vancouver, Washington, 98662. I want to just clarify a few things. The kind of the process we're looking to do is very similar to what we do in Clark County right now, between the county and the city of Vancouver. So I have plats in Clark County jurisdiction that I get utilities from the city of Vancouver. I have annexation agreements signed with the city of Vancouver. So the second the city wants to take my projects, I have no opposition to it, and it's as simple as a council decision for that to happen. I think City of Vancouver just did a large one last summer, 63rd all the way up to Costco on 88th Street. They brought in a mass amount of property, and particularly brought a lot of commercial property in the Costco. The Home Depot, City of Vancouver kind of likes to do that after everything's established, so they can get the tax base, and they don't have to worry about the processing to get it to that point. So kind of what we're looking at is a similar situation, that will annex the property if it's brought into the urban growth at whatever time the city of Woodland would like it. We're trying to work with the city of Woodland to design the project to city standards, because the city it will ultimately take it at some point. Cowlitz County has expressed they don't have a desire to have it indefinitely, but as a starting point, they may have control over it. But we are definitely working with the city and Cowlitz County to facilitate a mutually acceptable project.
All right. If you do this under Cowlitz County,
Yep.
it's my understanding that Cowlitz County would get the fees while it's in Cowlitz. To me, it's beneficial for Woodland to get the fee revenue from this development into the city of Woodland. That benefits the city most. So can you elaborate on that, please?
The city of Woodland would still be getting the fee revenue from water and sewer, because that's where we'd be working with the city immediately to facilitate that. The utilities would most likely have to be brought in. I don't know exactly what the utilities are. I haven't done a study. We've done initially to see what capacity is, and it appears there's capacity for both sewer and water in the area. As Travis mentioned, I don't know all the details on, who is paying for what in sewer and water. That's a little bit of a complicated measure. Obviously, I realize I'm going to pay for a large share of it, but there may be upsizing for future development that's not part of my project, or upsizing for a commercial development or commercial area. And, that's something we work with the sewer department in Hazeldale or Clark Regional in Vancouver. If I only need a 12-inch pipe, but they want a 14, they pay for the difference between a 12 and a 14. So there may be some public facility going into that, but at the moment I don't know what that is. I know we would most likely be paying for the bulk share of any sewer and water, though.
And how many houses are you proposing out there?
At this moment, I don't know. I'm still conducting studies as far as utilities, easements. I know there's a gas line that runs through the city of Woodland, so I'm locating all of that stuff to try to get you a better.
500 is the estimate, or?
I would say south of
How many
the
acres?
southern portion, you're over 500 houses.
Yeah. How many acres total?
I believe, do you have an acreage total down there?
I don't, sorry.
My rough guess off of, it's
I
over
was gonna
500.
say, I
It's
think
over
you're-
500.
I
Over
think you're more
500
like
acres.
about 2,500 homes.
My project wouldn't be 25, I don't believe, but I mean, you're potentially maybe 2,500 in all
500
there.
acres.
Yeah,
4 units per acre.
yeah. There's some habitat and pipelines and stuff like that too.
But
So
density.
Density, you're probably in the 3 to 5 acres, 3 to 5, yeah. So you may be upwards of 2,500, even though I don't initially anticipate it being there, but that, again, is over a long period of time,
What's a long period of time?
Years.
years.
Hey, Houston, can I ask you a question, seeing as you've done some initial research into capacity for city sewer and city water, and
Yeah.
have formulated some idea that there's adequate capacity for sewer and water? Is there excess capacity for sewer and water? Or are you saying there's enough for you? Is there enough for the other existing projects that are already within city limits to also have capacity? Or
I don't have the numbers on me at the moment, but, and it's been a few weeks since I looked
Uh-huh.
at them. Initially, it looked like there was enough capacity to serve everything in the city plus additional.
Okay.
So-
So everything that is presently within city limits, including commercial,
Correct.
industrial, we can also service this additional 2,000 homes?
And I'm not an engineer, and I didn't.
I-
run- I
yeah,
didn't.
I'm
I
just
didn't
going
run.
like-
I didn't run all the numbers,
Okay.
but it looked like there was.
Uh-huh.
From stocks I've seen from other cities, it looked like there was an adequate capacity.
Okay,
And-
so a couple more questions about what, that was one. City of Woodland and Cowlitz County has kind of some odd things on impact fees, whereas the county exempts certain institutions, like the school, as I recall, from impact fees, and City of Woodland does charge a school impact fee. Are you, speaking for your own company, are you willing to voluntarily enter into an impact fee for schools, parks, and transportation?
That's something I'd have to discuss with Mel, the owner.
Is that something that you typically do in the city of Vancouver and Clark County?
City of Vancouver and Clark County already have impacts for it, so it's kind of an interesting situation. I know we've done some voluntary fees before.
You have,
In
mhm.
different jurisdictions.
And you have in the city of Woodland before?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're definitely committed to the communities we do.
Mhm.
We build in. We like to build communities, leave them better than we started, and that's kind of what we're envisioning in Woodland. Again, it's been quite some time since we've built in Woodland, but we definitely have built in Woodland in the past, and you know.
Do you have from your experience, do you have a number that you could probably toss to us that, for example, in the city of Ridgefield, if you were doing a project, or where you did a curb project, in round numbers, what do you pay for school or park or transportation impact fees per house?
We build across the state of Washington.
Yeah, I know.
So.
North Carolina, yeah,
Yeah.
go all over.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting question because there still is jurisdictions that don't charge park impact fees or school impact fees. So it varies.
But in a
The-
computing community here in Ridgefield.
No, I don't build in Richfield at the moment, so I can't give you an exact number. I think Clark County, they just raised their park impact fee, but they range from, I think, 1,800 to about 6,000 for a park impact fee. Eastern Washington, for example, we put in the parks in the neighborhood, so we're exempt from the park
Okay.
impact fee. School impact fees vary.
Possibly Dr. Green can help us.
Yeah, I don't know what they are in the city of Woodland right now, so it's kind of hard to speak, and I don't want to throw out numbers ahead of time because I don't.
Okay.
I apologize, but it's a little hard for me.
Oh,
to
no, I
shoot-
just thought
shoot
you
there.
could maybe bolster the give back from the
Yeah.
developer to the community.
And you definitely will have an increased tax base coming from anybody that's in the school district. These projects would be in the school district as well. So I believe that the tax base would be going to the school as well. I guess the school district behind me can probably speak better to that than I can. Generally, from what I've seen, new development is typically in support of bonds and levies for schools, generally from my understanding, as well as the development community. We, again, like new schools, we like good education and to better the community.
I know that at least 2 of your prior projects in Woodland, if not all 3 of them, you did voluntarily pay park impact fees, and I think you voluntarily paid school impact fees.
And that's something that would have come from Mel.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so, and he's very much in charge and still, he's abreast to the situation here in Woodland and still involved. He's out of town at the moment, that's why he's not here, so I'm trying to do my best to kind of fill in, what his thoughts are and how we feel as a community, or a company, sorry, about the community and the project.
So, transportation issues, traffic,
Yes.
road issues, there's going to be a lot of homes out there. Travis, maybe you can, speak to this issue. I mean, the developer will be expanding roads and doing take care of these issues, and we have quite a traffic problem in Woodland currently. Is there still some proposal to
So,
have a southbound freeway access?
it's an interesting question, and it's going to be part of the fundamental conversation I think we end up having. If I could back up one step, and I might answer that question in a sideways way. So I do happen to have on me a comparison of the impact fees, including transportation and schools. So that's what's up there on the board, and you can see that there's a wide variety. So Woodland is this first column, and may not be the easiest to see, but next to it are the
Oh, yeah.
Ridgefield fees. Then there's the Clark County low, Clark County high, because they have different zones, impact fee areas. Then there's La Center. So in some of these, like for example, our traffic impact fees compared to Ridgefield, we might be 20, 28, 29%, so we're a third compared to what they would check in those jurisdictions. But we also have to bear in mind that the traffic impact fees are based upon the traffic projects that they have to pay for. So if they have an aggressive program of road maintenance and road construction, their impact fees are going to be considerably higher. Whereas if we have no intent of building additional roads, our fee is going to be lower. Schools, on the other hand, are a great example because we just built a high school and we have other facilities that have been constructed or that we've spent capital funds on. And so our fees may be disproportionately high because other jurisdictions haven't built a new high school in 20 years. Therefore, their fees are lower because they're not buying for a new high school. So we would address the impact fees individually based on the community, but if you're looking at kind of, is there a disincentive or an incentive to build in Woodland? This is part of their calculations, but
Now, is there a proposal potentially for a new school out in that area?
Mike might answer that for you, but I don't know about
Okay.
that. But to answer your other question, Cowlitz County doesn't collect impact fees. They could choose to collect SEPA mitigation fees, and they could ask them to pay $200 or $2,000 based upon whether there are environmental impacts that warrant collecting
Right,
some
but
other
if
kind
the-
of mitigation.
But if the development, if it was already annexed and the property was in the city of Woodland, Woodland would collect impact fees.
Yes.
So if it's done under Cowlitz County, it's my understanding that Woodland loses that revenue.
In some ways, yes, but it also depends upon the calculus. So, for example, the issue was brought up, permit revenues. I think our subdivision fee might be $4,000. But if I spend $10,000 worth of my time, the $4,000 doesn't make much. I might be perfectly happy to let the Cowlitz County staff do all of the work, and then we'll annex it after they've spent dollars to save us nickels.
Well, I
Yeah,
get that. That
yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, so we need to balance, where does our revenue come from?
Sure.
You know, because if
No,
we're
that's
getting
logical.
$10,000 a month in water and sewer, but we're worried about $4,000
Right.
a one-time fee, they may have a very good argument for us to do an agreement with the county to have.
Sure.
That's again part of the discussion, because you likely have to staff up, and I don't know what the permit level is, or inspectors, and so on and so forth.
And
So the
that-
idea would be, regardless, the city of Woodland would annex it at some point.
Theoretically, but that's a legislative decision for the council, and they might wait. And this gets back to your question of when are they going to apply? They could theoretically be part of the urban growth boundary, and if they're willing to spend, $2 million on water and sewer improvements, maybe we let them develop under the county zoning,
Yeah.
and they annex after all the water and sewer is in. Therefore, we don't have to decide what our zoning changes are going to be,
Sure.
and they don't have to wait 18 months to get our answer
Sure.
before they develop. Maybe they're already making progress in the county, and once they get their approvals, then we annex them, because the zoning doesn't matter. We know what we're getting.
You're driving me
Thanks.
crazy. It's the Cowlitz County Comprehensive Plan. It's not a zoning ordinance. Drives me nuts. So, it's comp plan designation.
I think that's all I had for the moment. If you has any other questions,
Thank you.
I'm
Appreciate that.
happy to answer them. I appreciate you.
Anybody else?
Is nice.
Okay, I
Thank
appreciate you
you.
taking the time to hear us out and look at the proposals. I think Steve still has a few.
So, who's
minor
next?
I was just going to add, I wanted to always let my boss speak first, but the one thing I wanted to add to the last part of the conversation is part and parcel of the comprehensive plan are capital facilities plans. I mean, they're required to be adopted as part of your comprehensive plan. And your capital facilities plans will describe in detail what the transportation, sewer, water needs are going to be for any proposed expansion. So it will be, but it's the money that goes into those studies that we're willing to help spend for the city to figure that out. And so that's what we're really asking for, is the ability to spend a lot of money on the city's behalf to plan this out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Michael Green, Superintendent of Schools, Woodland Public Schools, 800 2nd Street, and here in Woodland. Thank you. This is an important topic for us as a school district, as we, as you know, have a beautiful new high school that has capacity for more students, but at the same time we have 3 elementary schools, 1 in Yale Valley and 2 in Woodland. The 2 in Woodland are over capacity at this point, just a few years out. They were looking at all of our projections actually scheduled to go out this year, and we have added over the last 2 years 6 portable classrooms to our intermediate school. Thankfully, we had those impact fees to be able to do that. As we were looking at growth before these everything but scenario 1, we anticipated that we would be looking at incremental growth to our buildings. We had talked about, as an example, a 12 classroom expansion to our intermediate school, as well as possible expansion to the primary, but we're kind of waiting on bated breath, or waiting with bated breath to see the direction that the city goes, because looking at our latest projections, we would anticipate that likely we would want to build a 3rd elementary school downriver, likely out in the Bottoms area. But we're not sure which way that's going. I would advocate that whether the various builders are in the county or in the city, that we find a way to be able to assess some impact fees for schools. I trust that Ajo Construction, because of their past history, would contribute. I am not sure that other developers would. So I, representing the school district, would hope that annexation occurs prior to extending those building permits to ensure that we have the funds to house students in the short term until we get a school building built. I'm not sure what other questions you might have of the school district and our interests.
But that was really my question, and you answered it. But, I mean, that's important for me to understand in this whole process of where you know, if we need to build a new school, we need to understand the big picture.
Yes, and if we have 1,200 homes come into this area, or 2,000 as June is calculating.
In that one area.
Yeah, we're
Let alone
going
the
to need a
other
lot of
growth.
school.
Mhm.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, what are the impacts? You receive impact fees only in the city of Woodland.
That is correct.
You do not receive in Cowlitz or Clark.
We believe there's an avenue under SEPA to be able to collect them from Cowlitz County. The Cowlitz County Commissioners have routinely not agreed with us that there's an avenue under SEPA. We do collect them in Clark County
You do
as
collect
well.
in Clark, okay. And what do you collect? Is it the same in Clark and Cowlitz?
I believe Clark is slightly higher. Our formula actually generates a higher number. We recently had student generation rates, in other words, how many students a typical household brings, and those rates will be higher for single families, and we believe probably drive even a higher rate in the calculation. The district recommended a rolled back rate, and the city put it in a shaker can, shook it up, came out with a whole bunch of different rates on the impact fees that are in some cases lower than what the district recommended or requested as well.
Do you have a number of what?
It's a pretty complex formula.
No. I'm like, we had 18 permits this year, I think you said, to date. So you
No,
got maybe
50.
40 grand?
Actually, I think I have the numbers. If you want to know kind of round numbers for revenue, let's see. So this is the annual revenues that we've received for various applications. Oh yeah, sorry, Litchfield. So in the 5 years since 2014, since we've been collecting impact fees, the school impact fees have equaled $690,000. Our park impact fees is $154,000, and our traffic impact fees, and this doesn't include 2018, is $115,000.
Impact fees make a big difference.
They do. We would not have been able to put in the portables that we have for students today if we didn't have those fees. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. You think it's in the best interest of the town or the city to annex that so we are guaranteed those fees, as school impact fees?
No, I believe that that would be in the best interest of the school district. I don't know what the town or city. So to be clear.
Thank you for your honesty.
Okay, the school district.
Yeah, I don't understand the complexities of how it impacts the city, other than Travis's workload, which he very clearly made. But
But if we don't get those funds, that's going to impact the people who live in this city, their schools. Is that-
well, ultimately, it will impact in terms of where we're housing kids, and whether we're double shifting. It will impact how quickly we can build a new school. What we do before that school is built. Yes, and ultimately it
So
could
it's gonna
impact
have a
tax
kind of
rates.
a negative effect on the quality of our schools now if this development is allowed to go forward without annexation. Maybe.
I think that would be a reasonable conclusion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes?
Okay, thanks. It's getting past my dinner.
Name and address, please.
Alan Engstrom. I live in Longview, and that's where my office is.
Do we have could you give us the address in Longview?
It's actually in the record because
Okay.
Yes.
he represents an applicant.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm here on behalf of Walt Hauser LLC, which has a little different position, and that's why we, in fact, filed a separate application, because my client is looking for a different land use, ultimate land use for its property down that's adjacent to the city of Woodland in the South Woodland Bottoms. And I don't want to speak about his application. I just listened to this, and based on a few years of experience, I have a couple of general observations. And the first being, you don't have to involve other public agencies or jurisdictions like Clark County don't. Because every time you involve either a state agency or another local agency, that means every department that, like the Public Works Department, the Building Department, they all have to fit you into their schedule. And every agency has, or jurisdiction anyway, has their own agendas. I somewhat suspect, based on what Travis has said about how Clark County has viewed that little piece of property in Woodland, that you're practically at the bottom of their agenda. So if you're trying to get something done in the next 2 years even, if you're involving Clark County and everything that's going to take, you're going to be frustrated, stymied, and exasperated. The second observation I'd like to suggest to you, that once you start analyzing kind of individual projects, are these going to be included within scenario 1, 2, or 3, I would suggest that instead of having just one hearing that will last you forever, that you kind of, figure out a way, well, what makes sense here? Does it make sense to deal with all the South Woodland Bottoms as a single unit? Or should we deal with all of the South Woodland Bottoms for what appear to be the residential areas and uses that are going to be pursued there? I have unfortunately have had the awful experience of sitting through hearings where someone's single application has brought 40 people to the room. And I think you have, there are going to be more than one application that does that. I'm thinking kind of the Moonridge and Empress project and the runoff issues and the flooding. You're going to have state agencies at your hearing and everyone else, the Diking District, that'll last forever. So if you use some creative thinking about what applicants belong together, should be dealt with to help recognize what the common issues are, I would suggest you do that. And that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Benno Douwe. I live in 1066 South Peking Road in Woodland. I am in favor of this project for a couple of reasons. Years ago, I remember that there was some farm property on the northwest side of Woodland, which people wanted to have an industrial area. And I remember that the farmers in Woodland were flat out against it. I was the only one at that time that was for it because I felt it was a balancing act between, let's say, the population that we have in residential. People were traveling from Woodland to Vancouver let's say, work at businesses over there. I felt it was an important issue for Woodland to let's say, get their businesses in Woodland. And actually, if you look years later, I think it was a good move by Woodland to make the decision. Lots of businesses are over there now. I think it helped Woodland in a big way, also for people that living in Woodland. We are now at a situation where we are looking for more residential area for Woodland. And what I understand, there are now businesses that have an, let's say, not such a favorable, decision of going to Woodland because there are not too many people that live there. And so I think it will help to create more businesses come to town on the west side of Woodland city limits to attract more businesses over there if we are also going to have more residents. Now, I honestly have somewhat of a self-interest to have this, let's say, this residential area grow on the south side of, let's say, of the city. Also, some fellow farmers. For my own business, I came to the conclusion that more indoor growing will help us more so than outdoor growing because it is more condensed, so it is more effective, and we have a tough time to get good people. So it's just let's say, in the benefit of our business to, let's say, a more condensed area, which I like to do on the farm that we have with greenhouses and with our warehouses. So we do not necessarily need all the outdoor growing as we did in the past. I cannot speak on behalf of the farmers, Donald and Ferguson, but I understand that the dairy farm business is very difficult. And they have a tough time to make it, so I think they decided to also team up with this effort because for them the future in dairy farming is going to be difficult. So anyway, I feel that it is going to be a good decision for Woodland to create some residential area on the south side of the city limits. And so I am in favor of this project, and I appreciate how that they take the lead on this total plan. And so I'm hoping that you are going to be in favor of it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Any comments?
I want to, so if I hear you correctly, you think that the city should annex that part into the city, or what are we talking here, the growth boundary or the city annexing this?
So they are separate. The first step is expansion of the growth boundary, which means we'll just plan for what's going to happen. The actual annexation is when we move the city boundary to to include it. So
Okay.
there are two distinct steps.
Okay. And
But I would be in favor of that,
of the city,
if that is,
Woodland expanding, and that's part of Woodland.
I would-
That would be a benefit to the schools.
Mhm. I would definitely not be opposed to that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Any other public comment? Okay. So, Travis, do you have anything more to add, or where are we?
Really, I think what we're getting to is that last list of questions for the scenarios. And that is, do you have any questions about kind of the scenarios that I've laid out? Do you think we need to add any additional scenarios, or do you think I've provided enough variety for us to get some analysis and some input? Then the last one is you think we're ready to start the public conversation and start gathering the information and the opinions that we need to move forward?
I would say yes. The rest of you?
Yeah, I think you've laid out a logical point, and, I mean, I think I'm comfortable with you.
I don't know. Can I say something?
Sure.
First, for discussion here in the planning commission, maybe we can talk about this a little bit. Number one, growth is coming specifically to the south, either, independently through people working with the county, and there doesn't seem, I don't think, okay, anyway, we're having this growth pressure. People want to do development south of town. And I'm not sure we can stop that development. If that's one of the options, number one, can we stop this development coming to the south of town?
No, we can't. We can potentially influence the density. So, for example, would we extend water and sewer to serve those areas, which would allow them to get higher densities?
Okay, so number one, do we want no growth? Is that really a viable
Well, that's
question?
That's part of the discussion, and
And he just said,
That's one of the questions I need to have with the community.
but if we
I have
can't
my
stop the
opinion.
development, what's the question?
So, for example, they might be able to develop as 1 acre parcels in the county.
I see.
We can't stop that,
Okay, 1 acre parcel.
but, it might be 20 acre parcels, in which case, if they ever annex, I'm dealing with 20 small projects instead of one well-planned big project. So,
That's not our problem, Travis.
yeah. Yeah, it's just a different growth scenario. And so, I'll plan around it. Regardless of which scenario you pick, I'll figure out what
Okay.
works.
But what if, so, I'm curious, just for the fellow members of the commission, do you guys want this growth or not?
well, in which way are you asking us? I mean, there is going to be
How-
houses there. You're asking, which of these scenarios do we want?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I want to hear what the public has to say too.
I feel the same way. I'm like, my
Well,
opinion
you-
is going to be based on what other members of the
You know,
community say.
I think we ought to get a temperature of what the community thinks, if we can.
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think I have a gut feeling either. Like, do I not want growth, or do I? But-
There's pros and cons to having growth, you know.
Okay, that's true. So basically, the issue before us is how can we best manage the development to benefit the town.
Well, the issue right now is
The
whether
city.
we like what Travis has put forward and if we should go forward with public meetings and so forth.
And part of what may be helpful for me and you is if you have specific concerns, we can talk about what those are so that as I go out and do my analysis, I'm doing the analysis that matters to you, not necessarily just the analysis that matters to me.
Okay.
Because if I don't answer your concerns.
How are you going to do this analysis? Are you going to have questionnaires? Are you going to just do it, is it going to be just like qualitative or quantitative?
So-
Qualitative is I'm going to go out there and talk to people and come back and say what I think people want.
So
That's
the-
not qualitative?
So the
He has
first,
to go back to.
So the
number
first
one,
step
have
will
a
be
process
both.
in place.
Which is,
It's our public process.
It's
It's
chap-
item number 1 on his,
Yes.
or 2.
Chapter 2 of the comprehensive plan.
It's the public participation plan. We have to follow this.
well, I know, yeah, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, okay, read.
It lays out what we have to do. We have to have we have to have open houses, we have to have mail, we have to have website, interaction.
No, I'm not saying that I don't want that. I'm
We
just
have
saying,
to have that.
how do you assess the opinion of the public? Is it my impression? I went to a meeting and my impression is nobody wants development. Or I went to a meeting and my impression was everybody wants development, or, you know what I'm saying? How do you assess that?
Yes, Travis?
so the first thing that I will do is I will take a look at these scenarios and I will do war games in my head to see what would happen if that's what I'm directed to do. And I will come up with those 6 mathematical models of how I think that would work over the next 20 years. That's what I take out to the public, and the public will look at the map, yeah, but some of them will dive into the numbers, and some of the numbers will say your water bills increase, but your school bills increase, but your sewer bill go down, and as those growth scenarios change, those financial numbers will also change because, yeah, we might need a new well or a new water tower, but we now have 2,000 extra houses to pay for it and X amount of new jobs and industrial commercial growth to help pay for those. Maybe the best model is model number 2 or scenario number 2, or maybe it's scenario number 8 that we haven't come up with. But I need to run those numbers so that you can take a look, and some people will look at the map and they're visual. Others are the scientists who are going to dive into the numbers, and others are going to be the finance people who want to look at the numbers. What's it going to do to their tax bills? I kind of need to run all 6 of those.
I mean, why wouldn't you have at a planning commission meeting, why wouldn't you say, we are going to discuss at the planning commission meeting, you know, growth or no growth or something, and the public is invited to comment. And
Yeah.
then it happens here, and it's on the record, and we can,
Yes.
I don't understand.
And that will happen because there will be public hearings in front of you. But part of my job is to go out there and educate people so that they understand what's important to them, so that when they come talk to you, they have, 3 minutes of testimony instead of 20 minutes of questions. So part of what I'm doing is I'm going to gather that input and synthesize it, and once people give me their opinion, I can tweak my responses to you, but ultimately they will have to come to the planning commission and give you their testimony and say where they think we need to go. And then ultimately
Okay.
you will have to,
Okay.
yeah.
I hear you. You just want to publicize to the people, town, that these issues are before us and kind of get people thinking about it and things like that, because most people don't know.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
I didn't mean to be a,
No, but
I would defer to Travis has done this much more than I, but Alan raised a good question, because ultimately, your job is not to control growth over the next 20 years in Woodland, which no one's going to be able to do. But you have 8 or 9 applications for comp plans to decide. I think Travis is right to have these discussions thinking about the big picture. But Alan's point of not sitting through an all-day hearing on 9 may be a good idea. There may be a couple of applications that really are no-brainers, because you may be talking about switching from commercial to residential within Woodland, or residential to commercial, and that may be a whole lot easier than what do you do with a huge 2,000 housing development that's not within an urban growth area. So I think Travis has done right to think the big picture, but it may be easier for you to try and figure out how you want to break up these 9 separate decisions, and you can send them up to the council at different times as you're perhaps taking more time to work on the hard issues.
Yeah, I'd like to see 3 move ahead separately from the issue on South Woodland. So the change to the urban growth boundary and comp plan amendment for that certainly seems different to me than the requests that we have that are inside the existing city limits. I think those should move separately.
I agree.
And you picked up on probably the most important aspect of this whole discussion, because if you pick 1 or 2, we don't have to worry about expansion questions, because I can tell what their answer is going to be. The answer is going to be no. If you pick 4, 5, or 6, we don't need to worry about the individual cases, because the answer is going to be yes, and we're going to do more study. If we pick option 3, then it becomes vitally critical, because each one of them has to have their day in court, and they need to argue the merits of their individual case.
I meant 2. I meant 2.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I meant 2. I meant 2.
focus on the,
I mean, separate them. People who are inside the city limits at the present time, their application should move forward for reconsideration.
Yes.
These guys, we shouldn't bog them down with the stuff that's going inside the city limits. We should deal with them separately, but immediately. Well,
Okay.
they own the land. They should
But I mean,
have a voice.
We should not, if it's within the city limits, things shouldn't be held up except for being
Well, our comp plan amendment is closed for 2018.
That's right.
So,
So the decisions can't be made until February at the earliest.
Yeah.
And that gives you a sense of the time that you have to eat this 9-bite elephant.
yeah, I'm like, so let's get them on the agenda so they can move to the first of the year and leave these guys free to come right after. If people want them to.
But ultimately, they wouldn't be able to move ahead any faster than the conversation. So expediting them because they are in the city, we can have that conversation, but it won't save them any time.
But if you can finish something easily, then you put that aside and can
Mhm.
focus on the harder issues.
Yep.
We can only do the comprehensive plan one time next year, so.
Which is exactly what.
Everything
Yeah.
inside and outside still has to get heard by the
Yeah.
council. So.
Yeah, which is what I was saying. So we could get a planning commission recommendation, but just not take it to the city council
Right.
until the
Well,
rest
you
of
could
it.
you could get 9 different recommendations.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And shove them all in.
Yeah, and they'll all go to the planning commission as a herd, even though one of them might pass through at a time. Yeah, I agree, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, probably 3 or 4.
Is that correct? We can only open the comprehensive plan once?
You can only review it one time a year. You can't do it multiple times. And since the last time we did a comp plan review was the first part of February this year, we can't do
Yeah, yeah.
anything until that. But then what the point is that we can't have a comp plan, consideration February 1st, another one February 15th, another one, unless
Right,
somebody
but
can.
don't we have it till, when it comes up, Don't we have a window like May or June that,
Well, and
We have an annual review.
yeah, the air unit.
there's a recommended scenario, and it's actually laid out in that agreement we have with the county, but it says if possible. But also, as the planning commission, you can spread out the hearings and hold 2 a month and make recommendations. It's the city council, they can only make 1 comp plan decision a year.
But can you spread that over a series of days? Because if the city council had to review 9 comp plan
Yeah.
changes in a single night, it would be brutal.
More than brutal.
Can the review be a, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or I don't know how that works.
That's a good question.
Can I speak to how the Clark County, I've watched the Clark County Council do this a lot.
Steve Madsen again. So typically, what they will do is they have a set of hearings that are typically organized around who's giving the input. And so in one hearing, they will have specifically a hearing for the property owners, for anybody that's included in let's assume we're talking about scenario number 5, just for grins. So anybody with property in there would be invited to come in to a specific hearing for the specific purpose of saying why they want in or out. And so that kind of deals with the affected property owners. And then there's a final hearing, and that's like a work session type hearing. And then there can be another one. I've seen them where they did it that then was just a general hearing for the rest of the community to come in and comment. And of course, in Clark County, that means a lot because there's a lot of different agencies and things involved, as was expressed before. So anyway, that's how I would advise you do it: is have hearings organized to elicit specific kinds of information. Otherwise, it just gets to be very complicated.
Okay, thank you.
And ultimately, I think their decision could be to amend a new map. And whether that map has 1 change or 5 changes, their actual action would be the adoption of a map.
Okay. Gotcha.
So you'd have a series of hearings or workshops to get the information, and then you would actually, then when they actually voted yes or no, that would be the one time that year that would be considered.
Yes. They either adopt a map or don't.
Gotcha.
And you're either on that map or you're not.
That sounds like a good work plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, do we try to formulate and then vote on something that's going to be presented to the council, like our recommendation, like the planning commission recommends that scenario 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever,
There'll be a
and we
public-
vote on it?
Well,
We
there'll be a
vote
public-
on it, or?
There'll be a public hearing, and people will come and speak, and then the planning commission will vote to recommend that something be moved up to council.
Okay.
Because
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Y'all have far more flexibility than the council does in terms of how you manage it.
So we just give them a recommendation. We vote on a recommendations.
Yes,
So we have,
recommendation.
and so our job is to try to figure out what's
Our
in
job
the
is
best
to
interest of the
evaluate the
people, or what
testimony
people
And
want,
make the best
or?
and make
recommendation
the
that you
best
can.
recommendation we
And-
can based on testimony. That is our job.
And the public is part of the, what we take into
Oh,
consideration.
yeah, I'm not,
You make
I
the
never said I
sausage.
didn't want the
What?
public
You make
involved.
the
I just said,
sausage.
how is this gonna work, this process? I didn't, yeah. Okay, I'm just
Okay.
unclear on that, so.
Okay. So,
That's it.
right. So then we have, staff reports, right?
So in the staff report is kind of the updated, we have the second quarter report for community development and kind of the applications that have come in and the valuation of the applications so far. Issued building permits. And the valuations and the fees that have come in to date. The second part of that, starting on page, I guess it would be 83 of 89, is my tracking list. It is not the most up-to-date version of that I sent you, but it includes a lot of the progress that's been made since we last met. And that essentially brings you up to date on kind of where we are. We are finally processing the glut of applications that came through in August. I'm still behind, embarrassingly far behind, but between kind of putting some of those things off until I could get this conversation rolling, because I know that this is something we need to start engaging on. So trying to get those applications processed, but juggling. So that's it for community development, unless you have questions.
Okay, I just want, because I looked at the City of Vancouver Planning Commission, so zone changes are not comp plan changes.
Correct.
So this internal stuff is just zone change.
No, that part was just the applications for people who are already in the city. So the blue and the pink on that map, those are the development applications that are pending.
Or zone changes.
No zone changes. No zone changes right now. The handout that Frank gave to you that includes table 3.1, actually, if you look at the third page of that, this is what in planning parlance we talk about a crosswalk, and it's kind of explains the difference between over on the wall the comp plan and the zoning. So the comp plan, which is the first column, there are 3 comp plan designations. You're either industrial, commercial, or residential. Those are the only 3 options that we have of qualifying properties by the comp plan. The zoning, which is the right-hand column, we implement that in multiple ways. For example, our industrial land falls into heavy industry or light industry. So it's industry. In our comprehensive vision, it's going to be industry. The question is, when they develop, is it going to be heavy industry or light industry? So if you look at the comprehensive plan map on the wall, you see the big blue area on the right. But when you look at the zoning, there's the light blue and the gray, which represent heavy or light industrial. So we can implement industrial a couple ways. Residential is kind of at the other end of the scale, where we have 6 or 7 zoning designations that are residential. So there's high density, there's medium density, and then there's 6,000 square foot lots, and 7,200 square foot lots, and 8,500 square foot lots. So there's a lot of different shades for residential development. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation, and that is, like, we could declare a property to be residential in the future, but until an individual applicant comes forward and says, I want to do half high density and half single family, we don't have to worry about what kind of residential it is. It's a black box, and all we know is people are going to live there. Townhomes, condos, apartments, single family homes. We don't need to work that out right now. That's part of the reason why I need to work through the calculus for each scenario and say, this scenario means there's going to be no more single family residential. To meet our growth goals, we have to have 20-story apartment complexes, and that's how we're going to achieve this.
And that was part of the complexity of last year, was the decision whether to change from industrial to residential was mixed with high density, low density, and mixing those together, I think, created hard times for planning commission and also for city council. And that's where we split it out at the city council. It was a lot easier.
So we could amend, I know we want to bring this to the vote, but we could amend, I mean, the recent case that we dealt with, and we've got controversy here, really, you could not, our comp plan prevented you from rezoning industrial land to high density residential.
That's right.
Now, right.
Because they were going from pink or blue to yellow. Yellow zoning does not fit in the blue designation. Yeah.
But with amending our comp plan, we could change, potentially change the area and mix.
Yes. Yep. That would be a policy decision that would be within your, and that analysis might help you guide which scenario you like.
Okay, anything else? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn then? Second. Move and seconded to adjourn the meeting. I will now close the public meeting at, let's see, I guess it's 9:45, huh?
15 minutes to spare.
9:45. There's a glare in the clock, I really can't see it.
That's okay, I'm still awake. I said, I want to wake up when we get there.
You may never get there. Thanks for coming.
So it is full fair market. Thank you.
Yeah,
Good to
thanks
see
for
you
coming.
again.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Working on it, Ben. I'm home.
You'll wake up.
Warm camp.
Yeah, with a crick in my neck, I won't want to go to work.
Oh, is that right? Oh, okay. And
When I went in, it was just more closer.
Yes, there should be a sign-in sheet right out there, right outside the door.
You heard it with Rocky, basically. You heard it with the tonight. If my message changes, let me know.
The cover is where those are being kept now up there. Thank you very much. That's a big help.
Do I have to sign the minutes for the last?
Yes, I have them right here. I need to find a pen though.
Well, and that's why the comment.
okay. All right, I see. Yeah, I'm new to this.
I get it. It's really tough.
But
And it's easy to.
so what is the county? So the county's going to let you build on a certain they like 1 acre lot or half acre?
We should do a planned unit development right now under the existing zoning. We have water rights.
Well,
Unit
that's
septic.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's,
Okay.
but that's not really how it goes.
Right.
So we
I
never
see.
get the kind of density that we want, nor will we get before the
Well-
we want. Remember, that's the, we have to talk about that. They all get a yes. One of the issues, one of the reasons why it's right here is because we believe that you can bring.
Good night, thanks for.
The city. You know, the more you stack on it, the less it becomes attractive, you know.
Oh, I
In other
see.
words, we're talking about building houses for $250,000, $300,000.
Is there a?
When we start adding
Yeah, I haven't had to do that in a while.
Okay, but you could add $20,000 impact fees. That doesn't mean you're gonna sell the houses, right? So we're
Is there a
trying to-
liability? Isn't that a floodplain or something? I'm just curious. No, it's not.
In
Oh,
fact, it's exactly the opposite. It's all diet.
oh, is that
It's all
good?
in the ground.
Okay, that's good. Well,
I have something
it's
that
good.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's where you got me all befuddled.
Well,
So,
Good luck, buddy.
but the thing is you're asking all the
School,
right questions because.
Erin is in AP European history, and a group of her classmates are going to England for spring break next week, or next spring. And they're trying to do some fundraising, and the idea is sort of, they're looking for maybe somebody that can lend them some support in the sense that, like a nonprofit that can create a fund. Now, are you guys still 501c3 or no? In other words, we're looking for somebody that might have, be able to sponsor a fund, not put money into it, just to be able to make the contribution.
I think we are, where we have had locally done anything that makes me know
Right.
requires me to know that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we are under the umbrella of the.
Yes,
Because Kim Heidrigan's daughter's going as well, so theoretically was involved. So I was just talking to the teacher about it now today, but if you put some thought into it, we're going to try to have a meeting with the parents and kids and the teacher to try to figure out how to help them. It's costs about $4,000 a kid.
I mean, you know, as long as you're not expecting too much out of it.
No. We're just, I think, we can't do it through the school because technically it's not a school event.
So, for example,
That's the principal's call. So, anyway, so we can't use school resources for it necessarily, so. I was just thinking that if we do, at least, like, we set up a GoFundMe page, but the monies went into the
so our
AEW,
comprehensive plan is
in high school, AP European history, some fruit fund or whatever.
I can send an email.
619 units.
And see if that would.
We were looking at
And
this,
it seemed like consistent.
we're not going to get any of those,
Yeah.
which means we need to find that
college credit for.
But if they step forward
Anyway,
and
just wanted to run that by you.
400
I'll
units
see what I can find out.
You have my email address somewhere.
and 100 here, I only
You got my blogs, I know.
100 acres.
So they already
Is she going to
have
chaperone?
the legal right to do
No.
that.
I think she would have liked to have, but we were kind of like,
This
yeah,
one's
Erin kind of
commercial
needs to
and
do
this
this on
one's
her. She gets to do lots of stuff with
They do.
grandma. I think
Yeah,
grandma,
so
I'm
these
still trying to
ones,
talk her
2,
into taking her
3,
to
and
Paris,
7,
so.
They want to go.
Yeah.
I'll translate.
And when is that?
Ooh, do you speak French?
That's all part of this.
Oh,
package.
really?
That is
Wonderful.
scenario 2.
I sang in French.
Would be just
And
letting them
Italian,
solve
and
their
German.
questions first.
I probably
Before we
speak French
move on.
fairly well.
Probably.
Spanish.
I think that's what you
My
said.
Spanish is
And
not
that's
I thought
What, I think that's what.
But I only talk
you
first.
was saying, and I think, I'm not saying don't
I
think
had a
about
really
this other
great
stuff,
compliment.
but maybe
a lady from my church
prioritize
when I
a
gave
little
my
bit on
recital. I
this.
had to sing
Which is scenario 3 of
Yes.
you're going to have to pick someone
That was awesome.
And
Yes, because
you might pick
when you're
these
singing,
three
I,
to go first,
you know, I
but
find
they're
it hard. I
multifamily, so they're not
sometimes
affecting
find it hard to
people.
understand.
So
English.
multifamily,
I know.
multifamily.
People don't enunciate.
Multifamily,
It's the life out
then
of
maybe they
it.
don't make their cut because we've already got our 600 units in these 3 properties. Well, where are we going to get our single family? It's not there, so they lose. It's not there, they lose. Industrial. So now we're talking
Here's the
how
kind of
do we
situation
squeeze
when
those
they
600
talk.
units down?
No, when you're
So
hear it all the
you
time.
might be able to pick some winners and pick some losers based upon that. That's part of the calculus.
I always pick the losers.
The other thing to remember in this, and this is how we game it out a little bit, is we've worked on it all.
This is supposed to be
Anticipate
built
building
so.
on it.
Oh, yeah, it is, but it was
And
just,
so it's sort of like liar's poker where you put part on the forehead.
it didn't happen very often.
You don't
but
know
It
what
did
to
happen.
Right.
Well, I don't remember about
Because,
these most of the time anyway.
what
Oh,
would
I
likely
do.
happen is
Mine are
you
vivid
can get
in
a
color.
foothold
And
get a
weird.
first phase done, and it blows out, and if we're able to bring product to market at say 275 units, and we blow
The
out
thing is, your brain taking out the
100
garbage.
units in a year and a half, well, that's gonna tell you right away that we've slightly underestimated our growth capacity.
Nothing to
So
do
we
with
can come back next year again and have the same conversation, we keep coming back every year and having the same conversation, and fine tune it and fine tune it, depending on what's actually, what the
Yeah,
market's
that's
actually
interesting
doing.
stuff, isn't it?
Which gets to my exact problem, and that is, do we have 2.5% growth because we only have 50 lots left to build this year? If we had 300 lots to build, would our growth be 7%?
I don't know, they say once a teacher, always a
this year?
teacher.
Because that 10 years of pent-up growth
It's like being a parent.
exploded this year because they built other homes.
Well, and I didn't want to throw case law and stuff at you, but there's very good
Not
case
here.
law that establishes you
No.
should explicitly use your growth management plan stifle.
I can't imagine we were supposed to do that.
Because that's considered an abuse of discretion. So you kind of have to pick a range and kind of go with it.
Which is part of the reason why I think we have
I think they could
inconsistent
do those.
growth numbers for the land we've set aside. And part of
Cars
our.
driving the horse.
Yeah.
Well, when I look at our map,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
I think the town, all that blue industrial, we got those little sections of,
Tiny residential.
Yeah, I ask
yourself
where the job's gonna live.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
exactly.
kind of, and what kind of tech, they don't live at work.
But the
And
other-
I wouldn't mind actually seeing,
I'm doing actually pretty well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But the other
I'm gonna
issue
get it all
is-
figured out here soon.
The other issue
Well,
that,
you're not gonna
that
be able to
might
carry
not
it.
have come up
No,
in
no, Travis is
2015
gonna
when
carry
we
stuff.
adopted this map
Oh, yeah,
is
I can't drive it.
nobody
I'm not
had
allowed.
actually volunteered to convert from
I'm
farm
not
to
permitted to drive.
residential.
Yeah.
So this might have been as big because
Especially if that's your
that's the.
gas.
Well, that was your
That is my
dream.
gas
They were
and brake,
very-
but
they were very
yeah.
explicit about the fact they didn't
In
want-
'99, I broke my left fibula.
It was
Down
very-
by
it was
the
very
ankle.
explicit.
I was in a
Well,
cast.
The
that
first
was
thing the
up to-
mayor
the
said to
city.
me was, let them
I
look
had
at
a stand.
Which?
We had a
Oh,
policy.
Oh.
Mayor
Drive
Finn.
it.
Oh,
And
I've been driving for 6 months.
I've been doing my best to educate him, and he's all like, oh my gosh, nobody ever explained that to me. That's
And I was automatic when I could actually drive that, but
So regardless of
it
what
was,
the
it was
capacity
interesting.
is,
So how are you getting home then?
it's going to
Actually,
be
Travis is going to be
by
there.
bringing at least
Usually
this
my
area into
husband
the HDA,
brings
it
me
allows us
water.
to plan all the sewer
But
lines,
you
all
never
the
know
water
this time, what
lines,
time it is, this stuff here, yeah.
for
Yeah,
what,
and he would have been sitting
if
here.
it's
falling
built out at
asleep.
20 years, if it's built out at 10, if it's
All
built
I
out at
do is
50, it
fine,
doesn't
so,
matter.
but I'm
Until
telling
it's
you.
done all the engineering.
Yeah.
And that, from a developer's side, then that will drive additional investment, because if I go into a project and I can see that all the lines are already sized, that's gonna
You get real
drive it.
creative when you have to.
You're gonna see even
Oh,
more.
wonderful. I'm fine. I'm able to put up to 100 pounds on this now.
Because part of the reason why
They,
you're
the
planning
doctor
on
told me
staff
progressive
is
weight
to
bearing. I
look
started
forward
with
and
50
identify
pounds.
stuff that's coming down the road.
So, I mean, there's no planning down here for
It
any
was so
commercial,
nice.
anything like that, why is that?
Well, that's not
Had me in a
necessarily
split
true.
for
Part of
3
our
weeks.
conversation
He
is,
checked me at 2
that
weeks.
guy's
The
commercial,
swelling was still
that
too
guy's
much for them
industrial,
to
and that
take the
guy's
stitches out.
industrial. The other
That
I mean, I'm
was
thinking
where
more like
such
shock.
an
Because nobody would like
Just came out, they were able to put me in the cast.
It looks like a lot
I
of
was in
ground.
that for about a month.
I mean,
But
but once you get
They,
residential's in
they
there,
were
you're
able-
not
they
gonna,
took
you're
that
not
off
gonna
the
put a
check
gas
engine,
station or a
and I was
Walmart or something
graduated
like
to a
that.
boot.
Oh, I
Yes.
see.
It's just not gonna happen.
Oh, I see, just, I don't know, I was just
And
thinking like.
I don't know
like
why.
walk now, right?
The doctor was surprised, but I had no.
Yeah, we're not,
Well,
Really?
and
Convenience or like
Yeah.
certain things like that. is what I'm
and
saying.
ideally, the problem is if you saw that, you wouldn't see downtown looking like a ghost town. People actually did.
yeah, and part of
Because there's plenty of houses close to downtown now,
Yeah.
they don't walk there.
Part of
That's
the
true.
thing
Yeah.
is, can we revitalize
Because he's a
our
good
downtown
doctor,
because more
because
people are
you're-
walking and
Exactly.
driving?
So
Oh,
this,
I'm a
that's what
wimp.
Ben was
I'm a
saying.
wimp.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm paying. No, I do, no, oh, no, oh, no. There's no S on my chest.
Well, of course.
Revitalize that area.
No, he did a good job, but he was surprised that I did.
Yeah, they're not, but if people talk
I
about
didn't even finish
commercial
all my
and
drugs
residential,
because
like
I
they're
kept back
usually
in the
exclusive,
town
they're not.
to
If
see,
you go to,
you know,
like, we
if
built
there was-
huge
if I really
developments in
needed it.
Pasco,
Was down
where there
to
was
one
nothing
night,
but,
I
just
enjoyed
like this,
that.
nothing but big farm fields. And
Yeah.
after we got about 500 or 600 houses in, boy,
Well,
then
yeah,
Costco
that's
popped up.
smart
and
not to
Home Depot
overdo it.
and-
Yeah,
So,
they don't wanna
the
Oh, no.
industrial drives the residential, which then drives the commercial. That's our Mel Olive would be on
I'm
our-
not one of those people, I guess.
Mel Olive lives in Vancouver. So he actually has a house on Old Loose River Road.
Oh, yeah, so he's kind of a local.
Oh, his kids all went to Prairie High School.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
We built houses in Woodland.
Okay, but I mean, yeah, you guys.
He's built long years. No, we're a large company. We're based in Southwest Washington. And I live. Yeah, Ariel.
Nice.
Did you
Just
know
a half
quarter?
Yeah, I did.
Since 1969.
Yeah,
So,
wow.
like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have witnesses too.
Yeah,
Huh.
Steve is the first person I met from Woodland.
No, you've got to, you know?
Thank you, Travis.
It just started.
Yeah. I hope I wasn't too annoying.
Also, bear in mind that there are hundreds of people at home watching, well, dozens of people at home watching, who might have the exact same questions.
Right, and the thing is, the I feel like I want to get up and say something at the beginning of the meeting about the mics. That's why we have the mics, is because when I go back and complete the minutes, I'm listening to that recording, and if you're not on the mic, I can't hear a word.
Okay, I see.
That's what the mic is for.
So you have to make the minutes now.
I do the minutes, yeah.
great.
That's, I'm working on it here, but I also go back and review it and make sure everything is accurate.
Yeah.
Put in time.
You have a tendency to sit back.
Yeah, okay, I'm
So just
sorry.
make sure that you're on the mic. And I have the same problem with people who sit in the audience and speak. I cannot hear what they're saying at all on the stage.
But that other guy from Aho was pretty soft-spoken.
He was
I
very
didn't know
soft-spoken.
whether he would come through okay.
I hope he did.
Oh, I see. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
See, I'm learning
So,
so much.
the recording-
Now I'm gonna resign.
No, you're not. So the meeting is recorded, and people can live stream it at home.
They can?
Yeah.
Live on
Yes.
radio?
Where's
the camera?
The camera is,
There.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I'm not
What I-
kidding.
what I think
That's
we're
it right
talking
there.
about maybe
I'm
is
front and center, I
supplying
think
some
that.
infrastructure.
it's like by the exercise?
Yeah, that
They
little
live
bubble
stream it?
above the exercise is a camera, yes. It's the only one, I need it. But
This side of the railroad track.
Yeah, they
we're
can,
black on
you
media.
gotta watch what your face is saying, because they can see you.
Yes, yes, and I try not to like
Keep
my
a neutral
nose.
face.
Yeah.
Don't roll your eyes too much.
But I'm shot. You know,
It's a 20-acre track.
yeah, I mean, I'm not against public input at all. I'm just thinking, how does that process work? And how do you actually find out what news you know, does one person get up and they're screaming and shouting and that's the voice you hear, or
No, I
do a
think
survey?
I think this is gonna be a much more, casual process than that. Travis was talking about, put sticky notes on which scenario you like. I like this.
Sorry.
I
He seems to
don't
have a
like
very-
Well,
this.
we're
He's done
relying
that
on
before,
him
and it
doing
didn't work
this.
out very well. Yeah,
He's
yeah.
doing a lot. See, we're
Yeah.
kind of, that's what I was thinking. I don't-
All right, thanks, Steve. Thank you. I'll give you a call tomorrow, make sure we're on the same page.
A broad process.
You can need more staff.
So I've asked for an additional staff member. We'll see whether we get it.
Very valuable.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, I
another
feel
problem.
as a member, my job is to just try to figure out what's maybe like what the benefits are and what the negatives are.
Right.
Like, you know, the benefits are we're gonna have, you know, more tax base or something like that. And the negative is the traffic's gonna get worse. You know, we're gonna have more, you know, so that to me is
Thank you. I'll go.
kind of the key to, as far as my job. I want to figure out what's, you know, what's in the, what it seems to be, in my judgment, from what I've heard, in the best interest, and that I can make a recommendation and
Yeah,
speak.
but you'll be able to
and
make
then
an
vote.
informed decision rather
Yeah.
than, oh, I think it's choice D. you know,
Right,
whatever.
or just, you
It's
know,
not a multiple
An
choice
emotional
guess.
decision.
Yeah, it's not a multiple guess test. It's actually, you know, you have some input
Yeah.
that should be helpful.
but,
Oh, I need to turn off the.
okay, well, thanks, Travis.
You're welcome.
You might be biting off more than
Yeah, I
you
definitely.
can chew.
Sounds like you're gonna have a lot of numbers.
Well, call me sometime if you want to
Yeah.
chat, because I'm kind of around a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, just drop into his office, I do that all the time.
Yes, you can.
Thanks, guys.
And if he's there, you can even talk to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I do a lot of interrupting of his workload.
Oh.
No. Just a different part of my workload.